Coming in at number 10, we have Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. One of America's very first superheroes in the Marvel Universe during the Second World War, Steve Rogers is notorious for dodging certain death after surviving his plane crashing into the frozen Atlantic Ocean through suspended animation. Even since becoming a modern hero, however, Cap still can't seem to stay dead, with the occasion where he seemed to be assassinated by Crossbones actually resulting in his consciousness traveling through time. An inconvenient misadventure, but certainly less permanent than death. And given the fact that the Super Soldier Serum also seems to at least drastically slow Steve's aging, and Captain America just might be more immortal than you'd think. Coming in at number 9, we have Alec Holland, aka the Swamp Thing. The being that now calls itself Alec Holland is in reality the Avatar of the Green, an immortal being dedicated to protecting all nature and plant life on planet Earth, that absorbed the memories and consciousness of a man named Alec Holland after a tragic chemical explosion in the swamps of Louisiana. As long as there exists some form of plant life on Earth, the Swamp Thing can regrow his body from this plant and transfer his consciousness, essentially ensuring that there'll always be an Avatar of the Green protecting Earth, and that the memory of Alec Holland will truly never ever die. Coming in at number 8, we have Jean Grey, aka the Dark Phoenix. An X-Men storyline and character turn so iconic that they've tried turning it into a movie on 2 separate occasions, Jean Grey has long been one of the ideal hosts of the Phoenix Force, a fiery power that's one of the oldest in the Marvel Universe. This incredible force is capable of healing any injury that Jean receives, and is even capable of resurrecting her entirely if she's killed by unnatural means. Combined with her natural mutant abilities already making her one of the most powerful telepaths in the entire Marvel Universe, potentially rivaling even those of Professor X, and Jean Grey will be one of the most important mutants for many, many ages to come. Coming in at number 7, we have Ben Grimm, aka The Thing. As the physically strongest member of the Fantastic Four with an intimidating appearance to boot, the Thing is respected throughout the Marvel world for always having his family's back, and even being capable of standing up to someone as powerful as the Hulk when the need arises. Ben's change into a being made out of a mysterious rock-like substance also had some unexpected side effects, however, such as the fact that while in Thing form, he never ages. This is offset slightly by the fact that Ben is capable of appearing human for 1 day a year due to the tinkering of the rest of the Fantastic Four, but aging only 1 day a year extends your lifespan dramatically, and combine that with all of the near-death situations or universal collapses that the Fantastic Four have avoided together, and Ben Grimm definitely earns the title of being practically immortal. Coming in at number 6, we have the Incredible Hulk, aka Bruce Banner. Considering the Hulk's most popular and critically acclaimed series of the last decade was literally called The Immortal Hulk, obviously the big green guy earns a spot on this list. Built around the twist that the Incredible Hulk has always been immortal and that Bruce Banner first died during the original Gamma Bomb explosion and has been constantly resurrecting ever since, this series took the Hulk into a wild new body horror direction. With all Gamma-powered beings apparently being connected to the One Below All in a way that allows them to circumvent even the natural process of death, the Hulk is apparently a problem that can never be permanently solved. Coming in at number 5, we have Kevin Connor, aka Starbrand. Taking his name from the literal star brand he possesses, Kevin is one of the most powerful heroes to ever be called an Avenger, gaining his powers during an Earth-wide cosmic flash known as the White Event. Gaining the ability to control and manipulate energy at a scale only limited by his imagination, Starbrand is incredibly physically powerful and capable of healing any wound on both himself or any of his allies. Starbrand is so powerful that he's one of the few beings to ever kill a Beyonder, destroying one of the multiversal beings when the Marvel Universe was collapsing in a massive explosion, yet somehow reappearing unharmed once the Marvel Universe was restored. And if you can heal from an explosion at the end of all existence, I think you might be able to survive pretty much anything. Coming in at number 4, we have Thor Odinson, the god of thunder. While several Marvel and DC superheroes have godlike powers, Thor is one of the very few that counts as a literal god. Having protected both Midgard and Asgard for thousands upon thousands of years, Thor has already had eons worth of adventures by the time we were introduced to the character in the comics. And according to all the storylines that feature an older All-Father Thor, he'll continue to outlive the rest of the Avengers by thousands and thousands of years more. With even the Norse apocalypse of Ragnarok focusing on the concept of renewal and rebirth, Thor is a heroic god that will likely never truly see a permanent end. Coming in at number 3, we have the notoriously durable Wolverine. When Wolverine was first introduced in the comics, his healing ability was just a quirk that made him a more intimidating warrior. Any cuts or bruises would just quickly become a non-issue to him. But as time went on and Wolverine became a more popular character, his healing abilities as a mutant became one of his most defining features, even more so than his iconic claws. Wolverine's healing abilities, combined with his indestructible adamantium skeleton, have been shown to be so great over the years that he's even been able to withstand the full force of a nuclear bomb, and getting his entire body ripped in half by the Ultimate Hulk. Even in the few instances where someone has been able to officially kill Wolverine, he's somehow found his way back to the land of the living through time travel or magical means, ensuring that Wolverine will live on to fight another day. Coming in at number 2, we have the one and only Superman. Perhaps the most iconic superhero of all time, Superman is also where giant death of a hero events hit their peak, with the huge 90s cultural moment of the death of Superman. After a grueling multi-issue battle through the streets of Metropolis that saw Superman giving up his life to defeat the unstoppable killer Doomsday, it appeared that the Man of Steel was dead for good. However, after a long storyline that saw multiple imposter Supermen show up, Superman was shown to have not truly died, but merely been placed in Kryptonian stasis until he was able to be healed enough to resume being a superhero. Even after the beating of a lifetime from a complete monster, Superman remained unstoppable and has remained unkillable to this day. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Venom symbiote. In a potential alternate future seen in the one-off story called Venom: The End, it was revealed that the most famous symbiote in the Marvel Universe has a longer shelf life than you'd expect. Keeping his host Eddie Brock alive for hundreds of years past a normal human lifespan, this story explores the symbiote finally letting go of its oldest friend and becoming the sole organic being left in a universe slowly dying to an artificial intelligence plague known as the God Mind. The symbiote wound up being the very last living thing before the universe was reset, showing that the most immortal creature in the Marvel Universe might just be a pile of black goo. No offense, Venom.
In its 10th Moon Knight, Mark Spector is better known as the vigilante Moon Knight. Once a mercenary, Mark Spector was left for dead in the desert, where he was revived by the moon god Khonshu. Appointed Khonshu's first and high priest, Moon Knight enacts justice to protect those who travel at night. Spectre also suffers from dissociative identity disorder, which has paved the way for his use of other identities, including millionaire Stephen Grant, and cab driver Jake Lockley. Since the early days, Mark has mostly worked alone, but he's also been a member of a few superhero teams, including the Avengers and Heroes for Hire. Recently, Mark discovered that he had a daughter named Beatrice with his longtime lover Marlene Arlone. But when Khonshu sensed Mephisto's plans for world domination, Mark left her to fight by his god's side and prevent that from coming true. When Khonshu succumbed to madness, however, Mark had to turn against him and help the Avengers defeat him. However, whenever Moon Knight would end up dying, Khonshu would just bring him back to life. So yeah, in essence, he's immortal. In at 9, Elongated Man. As his name suggests, the elongated man can stretch his limbs and body to superhuman lengths and sizes. There seems to be no limit to how far or wide he can stretch, but it's more difficult to control this ability the further he's actually stretched out. However, this also allows him to absorb bullets and then even just shoot them back by tightening his skin. He can also contort his body into various positions and sizes impossible for ordinary humans, such as being entirely flat so that he can slip under under a door, or using his fingers to pick conventional locks. He can also use it for a disguise by changing the shape of his face, although this is painful and difficult for him. But being able to stretch and move your body at will could also potentially allow you to stretch your life for longer than it should be. I mean, like, if his heart is giving out, theoretically, Ralph can just like force his heart to keep pumping by literally doing it himself, right? He can like shrink his heart and make it pump, right? So like it is partially possible, or at least there is a slight chance that he could be immortal, which is after all what this list is all about. It might be immortal, right? In at 8, Ghost Rider. Jonathan Johnny Blaze, aka Ghost Rider, is an American motorcycle stunt performer and entertainer turned spirit of vengeance. He was the son of famed stuntman Barton Blaze, who tragically died during a stunt. He became bound to Zarthos and the spirit of vengeance after making a deal with the demon Mephisto to spare the life of his surrogate father, Crash Simpson. Now, with the power to control hellfire and to inflict pain on those deemed evil with his penance stare, Blaze seeks vengeance, riding his hell cycle as the Ghost Rider. But like, being the spirit of vengeance, being in debt to Mephisto kinda makes you pretty immortal in my book. Like, in human form, Johnny has no possession of any superhuman powers or supernatural capabilities, but as Ghost Rider, he's the supernatural combination between experienced motorcyclist and Zarthos. As the Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze possesses a variety of supernatural powers at his disposal. However, any weapon crafted from heaven or like blessed can mutilate the Ghost Rider, which is the only way to decapitate and kill a spirit of vengeance. So without that, he's immortal. In at 7, Supergirl. Last part, Josh talked about how Superman was basically unkillable ever since the Death of Superman comic event, since he hadn't really been killed by Doomsday and instead was placed in Kryptonian stasis until he was able to be healed enough to return to being a superhero. However, the same thing can be said about Supergirl, okay? Kara Zor-El, Kal-El's older cousin who got sucked through a wormhole, making her quite a bit younger than her cousin when she got to Earth. Despite this, okay, Kal and Kara have the same Kryptonian ancestry, making them equals. So if Superman is basically unkillable at this point, so is Supergirl. It's just basic math, or like weird comic book genetics math. Since he equals her, they would both be deemed unkillable or immortal. And I think that that's fairly cut and dry. Like, obviously they can be killed, but so can basically everyone on this list, okay? So let's just cut the semantics and just like ignore the nuance. I just said that to a YouTube comments section. Wonder how effective that's gonna be. And at 6, Spider-Man. First officially referenced in 2005's official handbook of the Marvel Universe, Alternate Universes 2005 number 1, the sliding time scales is an attempt to quantify the passage of time in Earth 616 so that the characters don't age noticeably. Earth 616 featuring a sliding time scale means that rather than being fixed to any date in history, the modern era, which starts with the events of Fantastic Four number 1 and continues to the present, continuously slides forward in time. This period is roughly 13 years, which means that at any time in the present, the space flight that gave birth to the Fantastic Four always happened around 13-14 years ago, meaning that basically everyone in the Marvel Universe can't die of old age. Meaning that while stories like Spider-Man Reign, among others, take place in a time where Spider-Man is old, his main 616 version is pretty damn immortal, especially because he's Marvel's most popular superhero, which means that this man has like a death grip on Marvel so hard that they cannot physically let him go. Halfway through into number 5, Wonder Woman. The Dark Knight's death metal story wrapped up early 2021 with issue number 7. And in that issue, and the issue before, we see Wonder Woman at her most powerful, in a godlike form that's even more powerful than a god. As the comic book puts it, quote, "She has been a god before, but at this moment, she's more. At this point, she has ascended past godhood and can see all of time and all realities. She sees every Earth's timeline, and she faces off against the Batman who laughs in his most powerful form. This fight is so intense that they literally hit each other through time itself. Diana here is also charged with anti-crisis energy, a connective force that links all history and all lives as one story. Then, she moves on to become one of the hands that creates the multiverse going forward, with no walls and greater possibilities. So she aids in creating the future state story, which we see in the next issues, and that was seemingly the centerpiece of DC 2021. So Wonder Woman becoming a god and remaking the universe sounds pretty immortal if you ask me. And at 4, Mr. Fantastic. In addition to the whole sliding timescale thing, which actually starts with him, making him immortal as well, Reed Richards' abilities also make him quite powerful. Mr. Fantastic possesses the ability to convert the mass of his entire body into a highly malleable state at will, which is what allows him to stretch. However, this also gives him the ability to absorb bullets and make himself more dense, basically all the reasons why Elongated Man would be immortal like I explained earlier. But the reason Reed has a leg up on Ralph is because of his son. on. Franklin Richards is one of, if not the most powerful being in the entire Marvel universe, even as an infant boy. This guy came to the present from the future and made Galactus his herald. Yeah, this dude made Galactus his and Mr. Fantastic's kid being somehow the most overpowered thing in the universe, there's no way that he would let his father die. If he wanted to, he could just like blink and his father would be resurrected. That's some Omega level shit. Like, he is like a Zeta level mutant, okay? It's insane. There's no way that this guy is dying. There's no way his dad is dying. I'll save Franklin Richards though for another list because I'm gonna need more numbers if there is one. Getting close to the end, in number 3, Batman. Batman is possibly immortal for the same reason that Spider-Man is, in a way. Well, at least like the whole popularity thing. Probably even more so because there is no way that they would kill off Batman in the main continuity. They may have other timelines or Earths where Batman dies, but never in the main continuity will they pull a move this big, okay? His plot armor is what makes him immortal. It doesn't matter if Batman has been a thing for over 80 years, he will always be young and immortal, at least in our world. And even if Bruce does die, someone takes over the Batman mantle, and people commonly see the one who takes over as the proper Batman, since the public doesn't know that Bruce being dead means that Batman is dead, but you know, whatever. Honestly though, Batman would end up killing Death if the story needed it, and honestly there would be no question in people's minds. They'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. In the comments of times Batman embarrassed his villains, everyone seems to agree with me that Batman's greatest power isn't his money or his courage, but instead the plot armor given to him because he's DC's biggest moneymaker. But ultimately, in at number 2, Sentry. Sentry is an absolute powerhouse, so it's no surprise that he's basically immortal, okay? Even like any threat this dude will take on. Sentry has even fought and beaten Ares, which is already impressive, but how he did it is even better. Sentry used to be a part of Norman Osborn's Avengers, who went to Asgard in an attempt to lay siege and claim it, because you know, it's Norman Osborn's Avengers. However, the Marvel version of the Greek god of war didn't like that idea, so after he learned of Osborn's intentions, he came down to kill the Green Goblin. But Ares did not anticipate the absolute powerhouse that is Sentry. Sentry's monster arms. He picked him up and tore him in half. Okay? Like, how the absolute living hell did this man tear a Greek god in half? He absolutely obliterated the god of war without breaking a sweat. And if that doesn't show you the sheer power of Sentry and how overpowered Marvel thinks that Superman is, then nothing will actually show you at this point. You're a lost cause. But yeah, I feel like that makes him immortal. And finally, in at number 1, The Flash. Technically speaking, the comic version of Barry Allen survived Crisis on Infinite Earths, despite everyone believing him to be dead, since he returned to the Speed Force after turning into the lightning bolt that gave him his powers to begin with. That's also an interesting story. But after transforming into pure lightning, traveling through time and space, and striking himself, Barry was sent back into the Speed Force, and later escapes and comes back into our world in the Flash Rebirth storyline. So technically, he survived the comic version of Crisis because he didn't die. Okay, he just transcended dimensions, which is a damn testament to how the Flash will never really die, okay? If he can have a very public and very impactful sacrifice to save literally all of reality and then just be brought back because he just went into the Speed Force like some sort of speedster Valhalla, it just makes me think that if any speedster dies, they'll just go into the Speed Force and then be able to be brought back. And in reality, every character is immortal if the writers want to bring them back for whatever reason. They will always find a way. In at 10, Squirrel Girl. There are 2 types of people in this world, those who have heard of Squirrel Girl and those who don't know what true happiness really is. Suffering a modification in her genes for unknown reasons, Doreen Green gained squirrel-like abilities, most obviously in the form of a prehensile tail, but she was somehow not a mutant. She realized she could communicate with squirrels when she overheard one in her window. She saved it from being chased by a dog and they ultimately became friends. That squirrel encouraged her to use her powers to help people, but he also called himself Monkey Joe, so I don't know if he was a comedian or just stupid. Her first appearance was in Marvel Superheroes Volume 2 number 8 in 1991 alongside Iron Man, but only really got traction in the 21st century when fans went nuts for her. Get it? Nuts for her? Because she's a squirrel girl. Well, anyway, due to her popularity and wholesome nature, there isn't really gonna be an opportunity for her to get killed off, especially when she's gone up against Galactus, Thanos, and Dr. Doom without a scratch. Unless we believe Rick and Morty, which says that if you overhear squirrels, you're gonna have to leave the whole dimension. So I think that's really the scary part. She's probably in cahoots with the squirrels, toppling nations. you know. And at 9, Headpool. On Earth 2149, the reality was similar to that of the 616 universe we are familiar with only a few differences. One of them being Steve Rogers was Colonel America, and one of them being a literal zombie plague that turned all superheroes into zombies. Fairly topical if you ask me. Well, the Deadpool of this universe has another thing coming, since after a fight with the Silver Surfer, he was brought to Earth 616, where he took out Jennifer Kale's magic. He was thought to have been killed when he got lured into the blades of a nearby skiff, completely obliterating him. But since he was the only one with the virus on this Earth, he was contained by armor. Deadpool was now only a head, but still managed to escape Armor HQ with the help of Simon Garth. Headpool is basically just zombie Deadpool's head, and the fact that this exists is so Deadpool it hurts. And the fact that he didn't die when reduced to only a head is something that would literally kill almost anyone else is proof enough that Headpool cannot be killed. The merc with half a mouth is still hopping around and gonna bust the cap in your ass because it's the only thing he can reach with the gun. Pretty funny, but still scary since, you know, it's a thing. It's a zombie head. Jeez. And it ain't Lobo. Let's face it, Lobo is one pretty scary looking dude. While first he was introduced as a villain in the 80s, he was revived as an anti-hero in the early 90s after his creators forgot about him. How can you forget about him? Lobo is one crazy bounty hunter, with muscles that are more ripped than my homework every time I told my teachers that my dog had eaten it. I didn't have a dog. And with the attitude and outfit to match. I think the scariest part about him though is just the hair. He even ended up joining the new Justice League at one point, becoming one of its founding members. Lobo probably has one of the coolest power sets. While it may not be super speed or the power of the gods, he can shake off blows from even Superman, taking planet-destroying attacks without a scratch. But he is also banned from entering both heaven and hell, making him functionally immortal. If you aren't allowed to enter the afterlife, I'm pretty sure you won't be able to even get the chance to. And honestly, I'm already banned from entering one of them, so all I need is the other one to hate me and I'm golden. I'll be in the same boat as Lobo. Just wish I had those muscles though. And at 7, the Eternal Warrior. Being named such because he existed prior to recorded history, the Eternal Warrior is one of 3 brothers who are also as ancient as my 12th grade contact teacher. Boom! I haven't let it go. He has defended Earth for thousands of years and has acquired a millennia of military knowledge, and more than just that, he has seen history unfold. Other than being immortal, he possesses increased strength, agility, incredible durability, and an incredibly impressive healing factor that allowed him to survive nuclear fallout. Within the Valiant universe that he was written into, there is no known way of killing him. He is sworn to protect the Geomancers to ensure their survival. These people have a special bond with the Earth, and there must always be one alive to protect it and speak for it. In more ways than one, the Eternal Warrior is the protector of Earth more than Hal Jordan or any other hero. As long as the planet exists, the Eternal Warrior will as well, which is pretty dope. When only the inevitable heat death of the universe can kill you? I'd take that. And at 6, Ghost Rider. Johnny Blaze agrees to give his soul to the devil in order to save his father's life. Because of this, at night, when he is around evil, he becomes surrounded in literal hellfire and his head becomes a fiery skull. First appearing in Marvel Spotlight number 5, Ghost Rider rides a fiery motorcycle and can launch blasts of hellfire from his typically skeletal hands. There have been many incarnations of Ghost Rider over the years, notably Johnny Blaze, Noble Kane, Danny Ketch, and Robbie Reyes. The fact that there will never not be a Ghost Rider serves as more of a permanent way of not being able to die, but that's in spirit. The whole making a deal with the devil and becoming a literal hellfire demon when around evil thing helps too, and is probably more along the lines of what was expected for this list, especially because who doesn't want to ride a motorcycle that cool? I remember in high school I wanted to get my motorcycle license instead of my driver's license since I could drive a motorcycle by myself faster than a car, but my mom wouldn't let me. Well, look at me now, Mom. On my own and unable to afford the test or even a damn motorcycle. Halfway through at number 5, the Hulk. The Hulk is one bad mamma jamma, and the fact that he is made from radiation should remind you that there is no way of killing this guy. Bruce himself even said in the first Avengers movie he tried to kill himself as Bruce, but Hulk spit the bullet out. This is even further solidified by the Future Imperfect storyline, when Hulk is brought 100 years into the future and sees himself, still alive even after a nuclear war that had killed almost all of Earth's superhumans. This war, by the way, had also taken the world to the brink of extinction, meaning Hulk, or Maestro as he was known then, was one of the only remaining souls in existence. but I guess technically that can be said about all of us, even right now. This, in combination with Maestro absorbing the radiation from the nukes, giving him increased strength, proves to be too much for Professor Hulk. Maestro is only able to be destroyed by the same bomb that created the Hulk in the first place, which is honestly understandable, like when your parents say, I brought you into this world, I can take you out, even though they legally can't, but that's aside the point. If you can only be destroyed by the thing that created you, you will never be able to be destroyed again, unless time travel is possible, in which case this was, so. Yeah. In at 4, the Spectre. The Spectre is an entity who needs to bind itself to the soul of a human being. However, the human who becomes the Spectre must already be dead, which may defeat the purposes of this list if you think about it, but I'm talking about the Spectre itself, not the person it inhabits, so apples and oranges. The Spectre is omnipotent and immortal, having powers over reality, interdimensional travel, technically resurrection, and increasing to infinite size and a lot more that honestly doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But in honesty, it's comics. Not making sense makes it make sense. Just like that sentence. The Spectre has had many hosts over the years, Jim Corrigan, Crispus Allen, Hal Jordan, and Oliver Queen to name a few. The latter being in the CW's Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, where while Oliver Queen might have died, the Spectre itself is impossible to destroy, making him probably the most powerful being in the DC universe. I kinda wanna be the Spectre, that green cloak's kinda bomb. Not gonna lie. And at 3, Franklin Richards. Hey, it's Franklin. Franklin Richards is one powerful kiddo, like the son of a Karen who stepped on a Lego with a full shoe on, but who's crying because he broke the Lego powerful. The mutant son of Sue Storm and Reed Richards is one of the most powerful beings in Marvel canon. This Omega level mutant possesses the ability to completely alter reality, and that in a way makes him immortal. Having complete control over the fundamental forces of the universe is a pretty big power to have when you're a toddler who just wants chicky nugs and choco milk. His powers even allowing him to perceive future events. Sure, you could just push him out a window after you climbed up a tower, but hell, he'll just come back in a wheelchair and become king later on. What I'm saying with that analogy that is as good as the ending is that he would see it coming, and could just alter life so that it would never happen. Plus, he can travel through time. This kid can make a pocket universe under his bed sheets while he should be sleeping. The laws of reality don't apply to this kid, so you will never be able to kill him. He's just too damn powerful. He is literally God. And at 2, everyone on Earth 10011. Earth 10011 is also known as the Cancerverse, an Earth whose history is identical to that of the main Earth 616, but with the Avatar of Death being destroyed when Mar-Vell was on his deathbed, using a ritual known as necropsy. They eliminated the Avatar of Death, making it impossible for anyone to ever die on this Earth. However, this doesn't mean that you stay in your prime forever. No, the Avatar of Aging, if that's even a thing, is still kicking, and you're gonna have more wrinkles than a Kardashian before she goes to see Dr. Fix Me Up. Death is literally dead. There is no way you can die on this Earth. That is all I can say about this. And that just proves my point. I wanted this to be number 1, but there is something more current that I feel will make more sense in this context. But like after this whole thing has died out, no pun intended, I guess it won't really make more sense. Whatever. Finally, in at number 1, Liesl Pon. Liesl Pon is one of the more obscure members of the Green Lantern Corps. I'd say honestly one of the most obscure. And while Liesl may not be able to be killed, the reasoning requires some explanation. Liesl Pon is a smallpox virus, being microscopic yet sentient and capable enough to wield the Green Lantern ring. It goes on missions that other Green Lanterns can't undertake, be it physically or biologically. To be honest, Liesl has played an integral role in various Lantern events, like in the Sinestro Corps War, where he helped to save Guy Gardner's life by defeating Sinestro's virus. Liesl cannot be killed because he's a virus, and technically a virus is not a living organism. Viruses are defined as organisms on the edge of life, since they defy all standard definitions of being alive. So while they're almost alive, they're not, and therefore cannot be killed in the same way. It can be destroyed, but it can't be killed, because technically it was never really alive. And I figured a virus was pretty topical for this list, so there you go. It might be cheating, but I don't care. You're welcome.
Starting us off in at number 10, Hope Summers. Hope is the adoptive daughter of Cable, a character who first debuted in 2007 in X-Men issue 205. She was the first mutant born after the events of House of M and Decimation. Now because of this, she had a big old target on her little baby back, because she was a baby then, with Cable saving her, claiming that she was a messiah destined to save both mutant and humankind. Now Hope is capable of something called superpower manipulation. This means she can mimic other powers, activate recreate the powers of others, and enhance powers. Plus, she's an Omega level mutant to boot. She got a major power upgrade during the Avengers vs. X-Men story arc when the character was bonded with the Phoenix Force, which gave her immortality. Up next, number 9, Mistress Love. Let's move on to a Marvel character cut from a very different cloth, a god. We're talking about Mistress Love, who debuted back in 1982's Defenders issue 107. The character is the physical embodiment of love, much like how Mistress Death is the physical embodiment of death. While we've never seen the full extent of her powers, this abstract entity is one of the universe's most powerful, and she can control emotions related to love with any being, even on a universal scale. Her powers are said to be stronger than Galactus or Odin, but not as strong as Eternity or Infinity. Also, fun fact, her gender and appearance are mutable, meaning she can also be depicted as a man. She often reflects the desires of those who see her. Up next, number 8, Moira McTaggart. Moira is not just a hot scientist, people. This was big news in the recent House of X, where it was revealed that she wasn't just a human ally and a mutant advocate. Oh no, girl is a mutant too, people, and she's impressive as Moira's mutant powers allow for her to reincarnate, in a sense. She's a mutant with limited reality warping reincarnation powers. She has perfect memory and is able to hide her true nature to mutants and mutant detection devices. So far, she's lived 10 lives, having started her life again after she died, possessing full memories of her previous lives. When she returns to being in utero, she's fully sentient. So yeah, that is pretty darn impressive. Moving on to number 7, DC's Valkyries. Moving on from Marvel over to DC for this number, let's talk about a group of bad women, the Valkyries. While notably different than the Valkyries of Marvel fame, DC's Valkyries are still rooted in Nordic legend, being armored maidens who ride winged horses from a place called Asgard. They would first appear in a DC comic all the way back in 1946 in Comic Cavalade issue 17. And have appeared since with little consistency. In the Golden Age, they appeared as Wonder Woman villains, but now on Prime Earth, they are part of the same race as the Amazons. Regardless, they have always remained immortal beings, ones with superhuman strength and quite the talent for combat. Up next, number 6, Cirque from Earth 2. Another DC character at this number. Cirque, specifically the Cirque of Earth 2, is immortal. This version, who debuted during the Golden Age in 1949's Wonder Woman issue 37, was initially a villain for Diana prior to being defeated by her. After her defeat, she would be taken to a place called Transformation Island, located on Paradise Island, where she was taught the ways of love and discipline by the Amazonians. Cirque's immortality is rooted in her magic powers. She also has the ability to command Sorkan jewelry trees using chlorokinesis, and is capable of metamorphosis with the ability to turn humans into animals. She also has a killer jawline. That's a power too, right? In at number 5, Threnody. Threnody is Melody Jacobs, a Marvel mutant who first graced their panels in 1993 in Strife's Strike File issue 1. She's a necroplasmic energy vampire, empowered by necroplasm. She's capable of sensing certain necroplasmic energies that surround an individual when they are dying or near death. To her, she's enraptured by the scent of death and the taste of the energy. Eerie, isn't it? She can also manipulate said energy to absorb the remaining life energies that a dying individual is releasing, and then can convert them into explosive plasma or temporarily reanimate someone into a zombie. In other words, don't with her. She can create hordes of zombies if the energy is in supply. Now, because of these powers, she is also immortal, able to absorb the necroplasmic energy of her own death in order to regenerate or return to life. Up next, number 4, All-Mother Storm. This version of X-Men member Storm hails from Earth 20329, also known as Marvel's steampunk god world. Yes, that is a thing. This is a universe riddled by mutant gods, who eventually an evil Charles Xavier took mental control of. In this universe, Storm is an immortal god known as the Skybreaker and is married to Thor. When she was taken over by Xavier mentally, he caused her to create a massive drought. Luckily, she wasn't under his control for too long and would offer the other X-Men the ability to become immortal, turning Emmeline Frost Summers into an immortal god with a diamond body. I wonder who her parents are. All-Mother Storm has the same powers as her 616 counterpart, but with a divine twist, seeing that she is immortal and has the ability to bestow god powers and immortality onto others. And as she puts it, she's free forever from the pain, doubt, and agony of mortal life. Moving on to number 3, Donna Troy. Donna Troy, previously known as Wonder Girl, is an Amazonian who, after some fun retconning, was created by an evil sorceress to destroy Wonder Woman. Diana would find out about this, save the day, and then shield Donna from the truth of her origin by giving her false memories of being a normal girl who was rescued and raised as an Amazonian. Ah yes, gotta love a retcon. Donna would become a founding member of the Teen Titans and has long remained a part of DC's canon despite enduring her fair share of retcons, as we mentioned multiple times at this number. She was gifted immortality thanks to her Amazonian physiology. Amazonians, fun fact, can live forever, but can be killed in combat or by accident. And if you're part of the Amazonians of Bana Migdal, well, they lost their immortality when they broke apart from the original Amazonian group, so. With Donna Troy being on our list, it's probably no surprise that our next number found her way into our top 3, and at number 2, Wonder Woman. In general, Wonder Woman is a character who has had a tough time getting killed thanks to how immensely strong and powerful she is. For the record, on Prime Earth, Diana Prince has been bestowed with divine empowerment, gifted with various powers by the gods of Olympus. She's a demigoddess with longevity that allows her to live much longer than the regular human being. But she ain't immortal. That being said, she is a character who has had multiple iterations of her created in the past that exist on other Earths that are, in fact, immortal. This is the case on Earth 2, Earth 508 aka DC Super Friends, Gal Gadot in the DC Extended Universe, a slew of negative Earths for the Dark Multiverse, many of which she's murdered in despite being immortal, and even the Wonder Woman television series starring Linda Carter. Diana in general is also one of DC's iconic trifecta, meaning she's got a decent amount of plot armor that prevents her from being killed off at the whims of DC's publishers. And hey, that counts for something, right? And finally, in our number 1 spot, Jean Grey. I mean, there's a slew of jokes that could be made here. Girl has died again, and again, and again, and again. But there's also a lot of truth to it, thanks to her being an Omega-level mutant and one of the most powerful female superheroes out there. Jean, without the Phoenix Force, is incredibly powerful, but when acting as the Phoenix Force's avatar, that power multiplies significantly. She's capable of manipulating matter and energy on a subatomic scale using her telekinesis. She's capable of resurrection, which is largely to thank for a handful of her resurrections. This makes her immortal to an extent. When she does die, she won't stay dead. Case in point, let's count those deaths and resurrections. Or at least some of them. The first happened in Uncanny X-Men issue 101 in 1975 when she first encountered the Phoenix while trying to telepathically maneuver a space shuttle with her teammates on it safely back to Earth. She crashed and seemingly died, but turns out the Phoenix Force saved her, resurrecting her in that very same issue. Once it corrupted her a little later on, she took her own life in Uncanny X-Men issue 137 in 1980. After that, Madeline Pryor, her clone, showed up, Cyclops fell for Madeline, they had a kid, and then the real Jean came back in 1985 with the reveal that the Phoenix had actually made a copy of her, and put her real body and self into an egg underwater, a Phoenix egg, in which she was reborn again and absolved of the planetary genocide that the Dark Phoenix version of her committed. Convenient. In the early 90s, Jean would be killed by a Sentinel, but then resurrected 2 issues later. Then, during Grant Morrison's run on New X-Men, he killed her off when the Phoenix Force bonded with the real her, and in order to stop her, Magneto used an electromagnetic pulse to give her a stroke, with Wolverine then stabbing her in order to save her from an agonizing death. I mean, that sounds pretty agonizing to me. She would be resurrected again in 2005 in Phoenix Endsong, in which her soul went into a dimension known as the White Hot Room and ascended to another plane of existence. So technically she was dead, but not really? From there, whether she was dead or not, she would be MIA for over a decade, eventually coming back in 2018 in a story titled Phoenix Resurrection: The Return of Jean Grey.
Grotesque was once a prince that lived in the underground realm of Subterranea. He is also so hard to kill. His first big fight that we got to see was against the X-Men. Grotesque was the last living member of his kingdom. An earthquake caused by Dr. Hunt destroyed the underground civilization, and of course, one survivor remained Grotesque. He rightfully guessed that the above world caused the earthquake and came up to avenge his people. He learned of the earthquake machine and decided to use that to destroy the above world. He confronts the X-Men and the X-Men defeat him because Professor X used his mental power to stop the machine. Frustrated, Grotesque slammed himself into the machine to get it to work again, but that actually caused it to explode. The X-Men thought that the explosion killed him and Professor X. They were wrong. Professor X wasn't actually there. It was actually Changeling that had been pretending to be Professor X under Professor X's command, and well, Grotesque just can't die, so he went on to fight Miss Marvel. She also hit him with something that should have killed him. He survived and fought the Avengers, and then later Thor. In the Thor brawl, there was again a large energy blast that should have killed him, but didn't. Not really. His body was gone, but his spirit remained. His loyal captive followers, the Lava Men, took that spirit and put it in an impenetrable armor, and he went on to fight the X-Men again, this time in San Francisco. Nightcrawler found the cheat code to defeat Spirit Armor Grotesque. He took off his helmet. His spirit was released from the suit and dissolved. With his track record though, I wouldn't be surprised if Grotesque appeared alive in a few years. Pretty Boy is more than just a punk pretty face. He has some pretty cool cybernetic implants that can expand to be 3 times their length. If you don't think he is pretty cool, he can just use his mind control powers to fix that. He gets access to a person's brain using these fiber optic filaments in his eyes. Then he kind of reprograms you. Pretty Boy is known for his affiliation with Donald Pierce. He was a member of the mercenary group Pierce created called the Reavers. While on this team, he passed away for the first time. Big moment in every Marvel character's journey, but like most Marvel heroes and villains, his death did not stick and he was soon back in action. The second passing happened under the leadership of Deathstrike and he was put 6 feet under by Logan, but again it didn't stick and the guy was back in action brawling against the X-Men. Eventually, by the end of the battle with the X-Men, he was arrested. The character debuted in 1988's Uncanny X-Men 229. A bonus story in Marvel Tales Volume 2, issue 262, featured the X-Men sparring against a pretty interesting group. They were known as the Desert Dwellers. Their leader was Sunstroke. He claimed he was created when a man's sense of strategy was melded with the power of the Daystar. I'm assuming the Daystar is the sun. Combining with the sun in this case gave Sunstroke the ability to create and absorb light and heat. The creation of the heat also allows the guy to fly. Sunstroke, like the X-Men, fights with a team, the Desert Dwellers. We'll actually get more into one member in a later video, but for now, there are 3 other things on the team. I say things, not people, because they were a cactus, stone, and lizard made into humanoid villain versions of themselves. Squadcles. The Desert Dwellers fought the X-Men when the X-Men were traveling through the desert. The Desert Dwellers attack the X-Men, but they don't actually care that they attack the X-Men flying plane. They just have been taking down flights for supplies. It's in this fight we learn that Sunstroke needs the sun to activate his powers, so Storm creating clouds made him almost fall from the sky. Honestly, the Desert Dwellers are doing a pretty good job. Wolverine gets chucked into a mountain at one point, but the day is saved when Banshee shows up, screams, and the Desert Dwellers can't handle it, so they retreat. Collective Man is just so interesting to me. The villain is actually 5 people merged into one, specifically 5 brothers from China. When they merge together, they apparently gain a connection to everyone in China. You heard that right. Everybody. The connection allows Collective Man, as the brother mashup is called, to draw on power from any Chinese person they want. Drawing on 10,000 people one time gave the Collective Man enough strength to handle Sasquatch. It's not all sunshine and rainbows though. The brothers almost died from absorbing too many people's life forces at one time. I think that's karma right there. The brothers also have another very odd ability. They can make any Chinese person a clone of a brother and then merge with them. They have a hive mind, meaning they can mentally speak to just each other, but if they want to speak the old-fashioned way but are a few miles away from each other, they can just teleport to wherever their brother happens to be. It turns out you may need to prepare for trouble, make it double, as there are no rules when it comes to combining. You don't have to be like 5 brothers in one, you can go 2 brothers together, 3 brothers together, 4, 1, it doesn't matter. You can get different size of the villain persona. The brothers fought the X-Men when the X-Men were in town to look into Zorn. The 5 made it very hard to do so, as they created an army of themselves to attack the X-Men. I just can't believe the brothers merged together and are able to then call on the power of all of China. Okay, so in the Marvel Universe there is Man-Ape, that is M'Baku, but this ain't about him, even though he is more popular. We are looking at Ape-Man, and also briefly touching on the concept of the Annie-Men. So Ape-Man was a human, Gordon Kiefer, that dressed in an ape suit. He had a pretty iconic start to his career. He tried to rob Stark Industries, obviously failed, and went to jail. But his ape thing worked in his favor. Criminal Mastermind, the organizer, was starting something called the Annie-Men, a team made up of other animal or insect-themed villains. Ape-Man was a natural fit for the squad, and so Catman, also a team member, broke him out of jail. There have been many Annie-Men, but the team that started it off and surrounded Ape-Man was him, Catman, Frogman, and Birdman. They fought against the X-Men in X-Men 94. The Anti-Men showed up to take over a military base, and the X-Men said, nope. It's in this comic that it's shown that Count Nefaria did some experimentation on the Anti-Men to make them more like their animal counterparts and significantly less human. 8-Man becomes way stronger than he used to be. The fight with the X-Men doesn't go well for the heroes at first. The reason? They're too tired. The X-Men get it together though, and in the process, 8-Man gets to experience Storm's power firsthand. The X-Men do come out on top, which really isn't shocking in the slightest. 8-Man does meet his end eventually due to an explosion. Bloody Bess, she is a queen, she is mother, she deserves attention. She is a pirate, and currently little is known about her past. Her present is a different story. The woman is a pirate. She is part of the Crimson Pirates. The Crimson Pirates and the X-Men first went mutant abilities to sword when the pirates were temporary allies with Goth, a shifty guy involved with unethical trading. The allies assisted with releasing someone that really should have stayed in X-Men custody. The X-Men ended up fighting the allies, and of course Bloody Bess and the X-Men were winning, but there was some possession involved and the X-Men were captured. Bloody Bess was in charge of keeping that section of the team in check. The team was taken to this market, and then things went south from there for the pirates. Goth was no more by the end of the battle, and Bess, along with the other pirates, fled. The Crimson Pirates stuck together and worked as kind of like mercs for hire. Bloody Bess, as a pirate, is very, very good at sword fighting, but she also has telepathic powers. She once tried to use the powers to connect with Omega Black for an assignment, but instead let the Shadow King loose. The king possessed her fellow pirates, and they attacked her. She called to Nightcrawler for help. They had a little thing going on. He arrived, the X-Men arrived, the X-Men also then got possessed, and Nightcrawler and Bess had to fight together to save the day. Last we know of Bloody Bess, she has dedicated her days to finding her old pirate friends. All in all, a very cool character on a cool team, and yet she has less than 10 appearances. She debuted in the year 2000, and her last appearance was in 2015, so hopefully she gets picked back up soon. Back when Hank McCoy, Beast, was being recruited by Professor X to join the X-Men, there was another guy who wanted to get Beast on his side. His name was Orlando Furio, and he wanted to conquer the world. He wanted Hank on his side so bad, he kidnapped him and his parents. He used Hank's parents as leverage to get Hank to steal a mini energy reactor. The reactor was used to power a machine that was designed to create global disasters. The good news is the X-Men eventually arrived and made sure the machine would never even once be used, and they freed Hank and his parents. The machine exploded, and the guy, Conquistador, was caught in the destruction and presumably also exploded. He really committed to the bit though, the Conquistador. He carries around a sword designed to look like what the actual Conquistadors would have had. It splits into a 3-pronged stun weapon that really hurts if its blast is directed at you. Not only does he dress like a Conquistador, but he managed to find a bunch of other people that were also willing to dress like Conquistadors to be his henchmen. He operates out of a building that was either from that time or built in that fashion. No one is doing it like him anymore. Bring back villains that had a theme and stuck to it like it was on sale at Party City. Honestly, I don't want to see any more villains that just wear all black and have pointy faces. I want camp, I want drama, and I want people to have a brand. So this next guy, his name is Thug, and that's what he is. He looks like a robot cowboy that has seen better days. Thug made a name for himself in the comics as part of Loeb's team. Loeb was very interested in the science behind humans turning into mutants even though they were born with no X gene. Thug assisted in Scalp Hunter's capture and along the way fought various X-Men. He came head to head with the X-Men again later during the Experience Substance promotional gala. Thug is not a mutant, he is a human cyborg. He had been working close to John Sublime and received cybernetic enhancements from him. Their purpose was to mimic mutant powers. They made him very hard to hurt. He was resistant to most attacks pain-wise, but you can clearly hurt the guy if the array of scars on him or anything to go off of. Probably the most interesting thing to me that would be just so useful when in a fight is the fact that Loeb was able to download info about the X-Men, who they are, and how they fight into his brain. He downloaded that into Thug, so Thug had a better chance at fighting them. Very cool. This Thug debuted in Uncanny X-Men 515 in 2009, but there are other Thug characters. They are green, and they have no correlation to 616 Thug. The villain El Tigre debuted in X-Men 25 in 1966. His human name is Juan Moros, and he was a treasure hunter. Specifically, he focused on treasures from the ancient world. He is a menace. That is literally what he is described as on the cover of his debut comic. In that comic, he finds an amulet that belonged to the Mayan sky god. It gives him an array of powers like telepathy, telekinesis, and something called precognition, knowing if danger is coming or near. El Tigre with all these powers only exists when he has part of the sky god's amulet. When both pieces are put together, he just turns into the sky god. X-Men issue 25 explains this whole journey. In issue 26, we see a fight between the X-Men and El Tigre, with the X-Men trying to get the amulet off. They do, of course, succeed, and El Tigre is back to himself again and arrested. He later reappears to fight off against Khazar in issues 3, 4, and 5 of volume 2, but issue 5 is where El Tigre has met his match in the form of the Mystic Mist. The mist causes him to evolve to the state of death, and he falls off a cliff. We do see a very old, very still body, so I think it's safe to say El Tigre is permanently resting. But you never know. The Neo race is made of super mutants, and we are looking at super mutant Salvo. He was part of the Neo war clan that brawled with the X-Men. It happened toward the beginning of the war between humans and mutants. The war kicked off when all the mutant powers were removed by the High Evolutionary, but you probably know that already. He survived the scrap with the X-Men. He didn't survive Magneto. He tried to attack him. He was torn apart. Why did Salvo attack the Master of Magnetism, one of the most powerful mutants? I don't know. If I were made of solid metal, which is what Salvo is made of, I simply would not have done that. I have a lot of questions about this guy. One thing about Salvo is the metal. He can turn into like guns on his arms, and he draws the ammo from his body. But if he does that, would he eventually disappear? I have to wonder, because I imagine the only thing he has to draw from himself is himself. Is he just shooting pieces of himself? And would said ammo stay as metal forever, or would you be left with toes on the ground? I feel like these are valid questions, but would this mean he has a very powerful healing factor if he were to regenerate every atom he's lost in a fight? Lots of questions for a character that I will probably never see again.
Number 10. Frank. Yep, Frank. Okay, fine. You may know him better as Frankenstein's monster. You know the beginning of Frank's story, created by Victor Frankenstein, or Frankenstein if you prefer. The monster eventually found himself frozen in ice, being thawed a century later. After falling in with some rough crowds, he would eventually go on to join various monster hunting teams, including the Fearsome Four and later the all-new Howling Commandos, after being recruited by Agent Coulson. Since he's kind of already dead, he can't really die, and since his cells aren't alive, he's even immune to disease. And I mean, considering he's the star of one of the greatest horror franchises in the world, I'd say he's pretty scary. Number 9. Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler definitely isn't what most people think of when they think scary superhero, but he was on my mind since I just did an alternate versions list for him. A link down below, maybe? That said, he's definitely one of the freakiest looking heroes out there, largely because of his demonic heritage. Now look, I'm no bigot, but the dude definitely looks like a demon, which is fine in comic books, but if I ran into him in a dark alley, I would not be pleased, especially if he suddenly teleported behind me. He also ticks the Immortal box since he already died and had to sacrifice his soul to come back to life, which sounds kinda selfish, but it was actually for the greater good. Long story. Number 8. Deadman. Boston Brand was a circus acrobat, but after being murdered, he made a deal with Ramakrishna, a Hindu goddess, to give him powers to find his murderer. But he's a decent guy, so if he sees someone being bad while he's finding the murderer, he stops them by possessing people. This led to him working with various super teams, including Justice Society International. And I gotta say, this was a pretty easy choice, since Deadman is a spooky, spooky ghost, which instantly gives him both immortality cred and scary cred. Making my job easy. Another nice thing is that he looks a lot more villainous than most heroes, which also means he looks pretty darn scary. Sometimes. Other times he's a bit goofy, but we won't talk about those times. He's scary, he's immortal, he's on the list. Next, number 7, the Immortal Hulk. Yeah, Hulk in general is pretty scary and pretty immortal, but Immortal Hulk is even scarier and even immortal. Not only does he have a healing factor keeping him young and strapping, but the whole point of the character is that this Hulk keeps bringing Banner back to life whenever he dies. So like, yeah, that's pretty darn immortal. Immortal Hulk, unlike other modern versions, only comes out in the evening if Bruce Banner is injured or dead, and apparently Immortal Hulk is the most powerful one yet. So not only does he look terrifying, but he's also even stronger than previous incarnations. Plus, as I said, he only comes out at night, and we all know nighttime is super spooky. Number 6, Ghost Rider. I think we all knew Ghost Rider would be on here. I doubt I need to really explain why he's scary, but in case you're totally lost, he's a biker with a flaming skull and demon chains who can consume souls and cause you to feel every bit of pain you've ever inflicted on someone. So, yeah, probably not great to run into in a dark alley, especially if you're a jerk. In terms of immortality, it's stated in Ghost Rider's Heavens on Fire number 6 that only God can destroy a Ghost Rider, since he created them. True, the concept of God in the Marvel Universe is a bit shaky, so this might not be meant to be taken literally, but I think it's fairly safe to call them immortal. Number 5. Venom. When it comes to scary comic book characters, Venom is definitely one of the first a lot of people think of. I know he gave me nightmares as a kid, although I also had a talking toy of him, which was my favorite. Represent! Venom is freaky not only for his terrifying appearance, but also because the idea of having an alien symbiote latch onto me and control me sounds awful. However, the most terrifying thing about Venom is talking about him/it/them. Am I talking about the symbiote? The combination of them? Which version of the combination? Who's with the symbiote? Which of the dozen retcons are we referring to? And how many people will yell at me in the comments if I get it wrong? Seriously? It's a nightmare. In terms of immortality, we haven't really seen a symbiote latch onto a host for long enough to know if they're immortal that way, but the symbiotes themselves are believed to be, so I think that counts. See? Confusing. Number 4. Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing is definitely among the lesser-known superheroes on this list. Some people may not even be aware that he's a good guy, since characters based on horror tropes tend to be pretty evil. But hey, as we learned with Frank, you mustn't judge a book by its cover, even if it is a pretty scary cover. Swamp Thing came into being when scientist Alec Holland had an incident with his biorestorative formula, causing his consciousness to enter a nearby swamp. This consciousness was then able to enter any plant life and use it as a body of sorts. Despite its horrid appearance, Swamp Thing would go on to find love and fight to protect humanity and nature. And yes, the Swamp Thing is immortal. As long as there is plant life somewhere in the universe, there's somewhere for Swamp Thing's consciousness to live. It's like he has like 8 gazillion Horcruxes, except he doesn't have to split his soul. Not too shabby. Number 3. Lobo. Lobo is a big, strong, loud, arrogant, violent blowhard from the planet Zarnia. He's also, full disclosure, one of my favorite characters, so I'm a wee bit biased here. That said, he definitely fits the criteria. Immortal? Check. He's such a wacko that he was straight up banished from the afterlife. Scary? Check. Freaky looks aside, his name translates to "He who devours your entrails and thoroughly enjoys it." And the main man lives up to that name, having exterminated almost everyone on his home planet, including children, with flying scorpions. Yeah. Lobo was created as a parody of all the 90s comic books that were hellbent on being super gritty and dark and intense, and he is definitely all of those things, with a tongue planted firmly in one's cheek. Number 2. Spawn. The thing with this list is that most superheroes look, well, heroic, which generally means they don't look very scary. Not so with Spawn. Al Simmons was a cop who was murdered and sent to hell, only to make a deal with Malebolgia to become a Hellspawn, in exchange for seeing his wife one last time. And he's pretty darn cool. Sure, the 97 version looked a bit more like a WWE character than Demon Spawn, but if you want any proof that he's a scary dude, check out the trailer for the 2020 reboot, because my goodness, he terrifying. In terms of immortality, Spawn won't die of old age, and generally won't die of anything unless beheaded by a weapon of heaven. Or if you manage to kill him in the Dead Zone, an alley on Earth that counts as heaven's domain. So like, you should probably avoid that alley, or he'll get murdered by homeless men again. True story. Number 1. Deadpool. That's right, nerds. I don't care that I've talked about him a million times on this channel. If you give me an opportunity to slap Deadpool onto a list, I'm slapping him onto the list. For the 3 people who somehow don't know by now, Wade Wilson is a wisecracking mercenary who, through an experimental treatment, gained absurd regenerative abilities, to the point where he basically can't die. And why is he scary? Well, because his skin looks like this. Yeah, those are tumors. You're welcome. Plus, he isn't exactly the most stable person, so you kinda gotta watch your back even if he is your friend. As you may have guessed, he's my favorite hero of all time, and I am absurdly excited for him to join the MCU. Just please, for the love of God, bring back Hugh Jackman for one more movie. It needs to happen. Please.
For example, we've got Armless Tiger Man. Gustav Hertz worked in a mechanical laboratory in Munich, Germany during the 1940s. Now, unfortunately for Hertz, one day his arms got caught in a machine and had to be amputated. While this is a horrible thing to happen to anybody, Gustav did survive the experience, and he was later given reading material on how to operate day to day without arms, instead using his mouth and feet to complete daily tasks. Turns out that he was really good at this. Hertz developed ridiculous skill in using his teeth and feet. He even took things a couple steps further. He sharpened his teeth into fangs so that he could bite people, and he even developed above average levels of strength and dexterity in his jaw, legs, and toes, allowing him to bend steel with his mouth, kick really hard, and throw daggers with his toes. He ended up proving how capable he was as a World War II enemy of the hero Angel and Wakanda, where he was completely destroyed by that era's Black Panther. What was really surprising was when he reappeared in Incredible Hercules number 129 to 131 in 2009. He was among a group of individuals that were the Greek god Pluto's jury of the undead, and they together put Zeus on trial and subdued Hercules himself. Past that though, Armless Tiger Man has appeared one more time in Ziggy Pig's Silly Seal Comics Volume 2, number 1 in 2019, and let's be honest, no one really read that. Now, Hulk villains are always a fun thing to talk about because they are either super smart or incredibly powerful, both of which make for a fun read. The character Ravage is one villain that is both of those things wrapped into one, which makes it all the more puzzling that he has completely disappeared. Dr. Jeffrey Crawford was a former mentor of Bruce Banner, who used the Hulk's gamma radiation to cure himself of a debilitating neuromuscular disease, while pretending that he was trying to help Banner cure himself of the Hulk persona. Unfortunately, like a good chunk of others who subject themselves to gamma, Crawford became a big old green monster who is subject to fits of rage. But unlike a good chunk of other gamma mutates, Jeffrey kept his wits and was both an incredibly strong villain able to rival the Hulk physically, but also cunning and able to outthink the Hulk as well. He had this plan to try and become Ravage full-time instead of only temporarily hulking out. Banner had to team up with General Ross to try and bring him down, resulting in a huge brawl between the two Green Goliaths, but it was actually Major Talbot who used a cryogenic inducer to freeze Ravage, and he was kept in suspended animation at Gamma Base being researched for ways to defeat the Hulk himself, and the last mention of him was way back in 1998. What always boggles me is when a villain has an absolutely huge backstory that ties into the Elder Gods and the greater Marvel godly planes, but then they just never show up. For example, Echidna, or Echidna, however you want to pronounce it. Echidna or Echidna was an Elder Spawn, the granddaughter of the Elder God known as Set, who is a big deal in Marvel Comics. Set was the first Elder God to realize that he could steal the power of his other Elder Gods by consuming them, which kicked off a whole massive war between the Elder Gods, turning most of them into demons. So his granddaughter is not someone to mess with. Echidna is the mother of all monsters. She made Angerboda, Cerberus, Chimera, the Lernean Hydra, the Nemean Lion, and the Sphinx, just to name a few. Despite that though, in the modern day, she has been a part of some just straight up sucky teams. In 2013, she became a part of the second Doom Maidens team under Caroline LeFay, who were eventually able to resurrect Morgana Le Fay. And in 2018, she became a part of Namor the Submariner's Defenders of the Deep when he decided that land dwellers weren't allowed in the ocean, and she stayed part of that Atlantean team until she turned on Namor and challenged him for the Atlantean throne and got defeated by Ghost Rider when the Avengers showed up back in 2021. Now, the villain Dr. Bong was a goofy villain even during the Golden Age. He has a metal ball where his left hand should be, and he uses it to create concussive blasts by striking the appendage against his bell-shaped helmet. We actually have no idea how he came to become Dr. Bong, because his backstory mainly just touches on how he was a bullied kid who found power in writing and language, so then he became a very unethical reporter, and then tried to become a celebrity and joined up as a performer with a rock band where he would play different characters, and one of those performances got out of hand when his hand got cut off by a guillotine. I wish I was making that up. Now, chronologically, he then appeared in Howard the Duck number 15 in May of 1977 as Dr. Bong with random knowledge of biological engineering and sonics. He faced Howard and eventually She-Hulk, and then in 2010's Deadpool Volume 2, the villain was reimagined just a smidge bit more threateningly as Deadpool's former therapist, and having cloned a team of superheroes, giving his clones regeneration abilities. He then joined a group called the Villains Anonymous, who all had run-ins with Spider-Man, and the last time he was seen was in 2014's Amazing Spider-Man Annual Volume 2, Number 1. Now this next one may be one of the more revolting villains out there, and it only gets worse when you learn that Douglas Carmody, the Bogeyman or Boogeyman, was a villain to the Power Pack, a group of kids. Carmody was in charge of the Carmody Research Labs, where Dr. James Power was working to perfect his antimatter power generator. When the Power Pack gained their abilities from the destruction of the generator, Carmody lost his job and essentially blamed the Power Pack for it all. Classic villain backstory. He then went on to hunt the Power Pack, considering them mutants even though they weren't. He stole a battlesuit from Project Pegasus, and using this suit to try and wipe out the Power Pack, he ended up coming into battle with Asgard's Warriors 3 and the New Mutants. Now in Power Pack number 40, a demon named Nastir, I think is how you pronounce it, invaded New York City, and he turned several people, including Bogeyman or Boogeyman, into demons. And for Carmody, he basically embraced it completely, permanently staying as a demon while the others returned to normal. He tried to wipe out the Power Pack again with his new abilities, but then he saw himself in a reflection and went tumbling off a building. That was back in 1988. He appeared one more time in 1993's Cage Volume 1, Number 19, facing Luke Cage, where he apparently passed away. But this isn't confirmed, and so he is basically considered missing, which isn't at all a pleasant thought. Now, similar to how the High Evolutionary created the New Men, he also created the Man Beast from a red wolf that he genetically modified. However, unlike the New Men, Man Beast was created using a new isotope which granted him a heightened physicality and enhanced mental capabilities, also granting him a greater level of ambition. He terrorized Counter-Earth, or more accurately, he led a revolt against the High Evolutionary, which, I mean, that isn't really so bad. That guy sucks. But he was eventually stopped by Thor before he could do real damage. He tried this 2 more times actually, being defeated by Wolverine and Kitty Pryde the first time, and then on Counter-Earth, he was stopped by Adam Warlock, who slightly devolved Man-Beast, which is kind of terrifying to think about. He would then return again on Earth as the Hate-Monger, having seemingly re-evolved back into his normal self, but then he was defeated by Spider-Man, and he was thought to be actually killed, but nope! He actually tried to stop the High Evolutionary again, infiltrating his Knights of Wundagore in the late 90s. Unfortunately for the Man-Beast, the High Evolutionary and Quicksilver devolved him back into a wolf, but he's returned from that before, so who knows? Next up is the villain known as Belladonna. Belladonna was actually a Spider-Man villain, but it's more accurate to call her a villain to another Spidey villain, Roderick Kingsley, aka Hobgoblin. But before that ever happened, Belladonna was Narda Ravana, a European fashion designer. The problem was that Kingsley was another famous fashion designer, only one that stole from other designers. Kingsley allegedly stole Ravana's designs and marketed them in the United States, stealing her success, and for that, I guess he had to pay. Swearing vengeance, Narda assumed the guise of Belladonna and put together a small group of henchmen. She used toxic gas as her main tool, creating gas that could dissolve Spider-Man's webs, taking people's lives and having her henchmen dress as the Prowler to distract Spider-Man, all for the end goal of wiping out Kingsley from the face of the earth. The most ironic part of this whole situation, though, is that Belladonna just didn't have the popularity needed to be a lasting villain, getting arrested in 1980, while Kingsley, he became the Hobgoblin, and he's been causing problems all the way up until 2020 and is bound to come back at some point. Okay, so next up is a group of obscure villains made for the express purpose of facing another obscure group of heroes. Heavy Metal was a team made up of a group of cybernetically enhanced, super intelligent animals with weaponized exoskeletons. Can't get much more comic booky than that. Their team members included Armory, an octopus because arms, get it? Tail Gunner, a vulture, Bloodbath, a shark, Ramrod, a rhino, and they were led by Uproar, a blue-faced gorilla. Now this team was created by Adam Frost of Multicorp as a prototype, privately owned attack force set to oppose the team known as Brute Force, which is also a team of cybernetically enhanced super intelligent animals with weaponized exoskeletons. Also created by Multicorp, but they were created by Dr. Randall Pierce, and these guys were good. Except the problem is both of these teams were really just a part of Weapons Plus, the ones who created Captain America and eventually Wolverine, and they are not exactly the best people around. Heavy Metal was around for 4 issues of the Brute Force comic in 1990, and they have never been seen since. Remember back when I talked about Echidna or Echidna, and we talked about the Defenders of the Deep? Well, this team was basically filled with water-based villains that had nothing better to do, and one of them was a guy called Tiger Shark. So get this, Todd Arliss was a swimmer who took part in the Olympic Games. Cool. He ended up damaging his spinal cord when he rescued a drowning man. Dang. He was so desperate to regain his swimming ability that he then willingly participated in an experiment by the scientist Dr. Lemuel Dorcas. Interesting. The doctor blended Arliss's DNA with that of Namor the Submariner and a tiger shark, because of course he did. This experiment was totally successful, only it completely changed Arliss both physically and mentally. Now he had razor sharp teeth and gills and had become savage and incredibly aggressive. He became a supervillain and named himself Tiger Shark, becoming an adversary for Namor the Submariner. Now funnily enough though, after years and years of battling against Namor and the superhero community, he joined the Defenders of the Deep, and now he hasn't been seen since 2019 when they attacked an oil drilling platform in Alaska. And last up for today is Bram Velsing. For starters, he has an incredibly strange name that is very obviously a reference to Bram Stoker and his character Van Helsing. So, Bram Velsing, also known as Dread Knight, is better known as an enemy to Tony Stark in the Ultimate Universe. Unfortunately, in the 1610 universe, he just becomes another Iron Man villain that creates another Iron Man-like armor. But in Earth 616, Bram Velsing was actually a Latverian scientist who didn't like Dr. Doom's schemes and was punished by having a mask fused to his face. He became kind of like a villain, but also a servant to Dr. Doom in a way, allying himself with Victoria Frankenstein and the creations of Victor Frankenstein, which would make you think that he was actually a hero, but he was never played that way. He eventually moved on from being just a Dr. Doom villain and has gone on to fight Iron Man on a few occasions, as well as the Black Knight and Spider-Man. He was this really cool looking armored up man with an even cooler mask, wielding a super cool lance, riding a black winged horse. It was dope, but curiously, while he's never actually been sent to the afterlife, his last appearance was serving Dr. Doom in Iron Man Legacy Volume 1 Number 3 back in 2010, and he hasn't been seen since.
Spidey Super Stories are full of villains we never see again. It was a series created in partnership with the children's educational show The Electric Company. The villains can be equally as scary as the ones in the comics, but sometimes they're also a little bit goofy. One goofy guy is the Wall. He is a brick wall. Literally. His backstory is tragic. He was a teen with an after-school construction job. A pile of bricks fell on him and he fused with his body, making him a wall. I feel for him. I've said it before, I'll say it again. One of my top irrational fears is that I will be confused with an object if our atoms line up. Poor guy. He's very mad about his circumstance, valid, and takes his anger out on Spider-Man, who had nothing to do with it. And on Spider-Man's day off too. The battle took place at a baseball game because that's what Spidey was doing on his day off. It's very clear that the Wall survives. Him and Spider-Man get kicked out of the game and are seen chilling on a bench outside. But that's it. He's just gone after. The only other thing I can find about him is his Marvel Strike Force profile posted April 1st, 2021. Hopefully he's out there right now getting de-walled by one of the many geniuses of the Marvel Universe. From the X-Men side of it all, we have Spectra. The poor girl is from an unnamed dimension that was consumed by a World Eater. She is the only survivor of the event, but there are also other universes that went through the same thing. She ended up joining a group of other survivors called the Magical Resistance. The Resistance encounters the X-Men, and believing them to be working with the World Eater, attack strike to kill style, forcing the X-Men to escape to different dimensions. When the Resistance meets the X-Men a second time, Spectre uses her lie detecting powers to figure out that they are all on the same side, and she helps the X-Men fight the World Eater. The World Eater is slain, causing a massive burst of energy. Spectre is able to fly into bodies to control them. She did this to Storm in the first battle, and it implies that she's kind of like a ghost. There is a very real possibility that the energy explosion vortex thing didn't hurt her, and she's just left because the World Eater was taken care of. She hasn't been seen since 2017's Extraordinary X-Men issue 16, but I think she deserves to make a comeback as a hero. She did have some character development and ended up as an ally to the X-Men. Flying Tiger has been around since 1981, debuted in Spider-Woman 40, and then disappeared in Amazing Spider-Man 18 in 2018. Flying Tiger was a former American football player. When his professional career failed, he turned his skills to villainhood. He became a talented assassin with a 100% success rate, until Spider-Woman, of course. Since his debut, he has battled Iron Man, the Fantastic Four, and of course the last hero to see him alive, Spider-Man. The thing is, we don't have a confirmation that he died. In Amazing Spider-Man 18, Spider-Man, along with most villains he's fought in his career, are being chased by robot Kraven the Hunters. Taskmaster and Black Ant created robots modeled after Kraven so they could host the Great Hunt, an event where the rich can pay large amounts of cash to get put in a virtual reality space where they control the robots and are able to get revenge on the villains that wronged them. The rich do not hold back. We see the iguana either die or get critically injured. Flying Tiger is tackled mid-air, and that's all we see. He's not in the comics after it, so it's unclear whether he escaped or not. J. Jonah Jameson may make Peter Parker's life infinitely more difficult than needed, but nobody deserves to have their birthday cake stolen, and by a villain, no less. The Birthday Bandit is another goofy villain created for the Spidey super stories. His entire thing is that he goes around ruining birthdays by stealing all the party supplies. The biggest birthday cake in the city currently belongs to the Triple J, and the Birthday Bandit wants it. He breaks into the building, grabs the massive cake, only to be webbed by Spider-Man. Unfortunately, the damage is done and the cake is completely ruined. Jameson walks into a smashed cake and doesn't know whether to blame Spider-Man or the Bandit. He does chuck a piece of cake at Spider-Man though, and poor Peter is forced to spend his day off in his birthday suit doing laundry. The Bandit is presumably sent to jail, but who knows if this wacky villain will make a comeback. Happy birthday to anybody who is celebrating today, but keep an eye out just in case the Bandit is still on the loose. Personally, with all the wacky villains that Spider-Man has had to deal with, I think we need a Lego Spider-Man movie the way that they did Lego Batman, because in Lego Batman they brought back all the random people he's fought over the years no matter how goofy they are, so I think we need one for Spider-Man. That's personally my choice for this, but let me know in the comments down below which hero you would pick. From the same universe and looking equally as ridiculous is Fancy Dancer. This guy is a bigger deal than the last one, okay? Spider-Man has had to team up with Miss Marvel this time to take him down. Fancy Dancer kidnapped the principal dancer in the ballet and planned to take her back to his studio. He gets found by the two heroes backstage and a fight breaks out. Numerous blows and dance puns are thrown around until Spider-Man takes him out by pushing him in a fountain. The kidnapped dancer is returned to the ballet and Fancy Dancer is never seen again. Former head of the Brotherhood of Evil Musicians hasn't been seen since his debut in the powerful Pachyderms in 1989. Clarinetto is an intelligent man. He has been posing as a music teacher at a music conservatory, but he wasn't teaching people music, he was teaching them to become celebrity impersonator warriors. There is a musical battle of epic proportions that takes place, and it ends with one of the super elephants creating a super blast that takes out the school and presumably everyone in it. We don't see Clarinetto ever again, which could be because he was blown away, but the power elephants were only ever meant to be a one-hit wonder, so we'll never know if Clarinetto made it out. Although he was a fan of the leader of the wrong side of World War II, so I think he can just stay away. That's okay. The Thought Police in George Orwell's 1984 are probably the most famous, but Marvel has also toyed with the idea in 3 issues of Sleepwalker. 3 issues for 3 members. Marvel's Thought Police were made up of Wiretap. He could jam communications between any device. There was also Nightstick. He was a very strong brick wall of a man, not literal this time, and he was considered the group's leader. And finally, Cuffs, a regular woman with special mittens. She had gauntlets that would expel highly versatile liquid similar to clay that she could manipulate to attack from a distance. The trio tricked the Fantastic Four into helping with their mission of ending the hero Sleepwalker. Sleepwalker does look like a villain, so the Fantastic Four judge a book by its cover and agree to help. Sleepwalker is connected to a human host, so they must go into the host's mind to get him. But once the F4 realize that Sleepwalker isn't the villain, they turn on the trio. Everybody battles, and then eventually the Thought Police and Fantastic Four are back on Earth. The Thing was about to clobber the group, but they were considered to be part of a government-sanctioned operation, and if he did, he would be arrested. So the Thought Police are left with a government high-up, and who knows where they are now. That was back in 1991 in issues 14, 15, and 16 of Sleepwalker. We have a member of another Brotherhood in the house. This time we are looking at Lifter of the Brotherhood of Mutants. Lifter's abilities include density manipulation. He can give himself super strength just by changing his body density. He can also manipulate gravity, reducing its effect on what he touches. Magneto created the Brotherhood, but when he left the picture, the group changed their name to become Mutant Force. They were working for Mandrill as soldiers for hire fighting the Defenders. Then the Mutant Force moved on to join the Secret Empire as thugs, again battling the Defenders. The group reinvented themselves a second time, becoming the Resistance, a group against the Mutant Registration Act. Lifter and Mutant Force would protest by causing disturbances around the world and organizing rallies. All good things must come to an end, and eventually the villain squad parted ways. Back in 2021, Lifter ended up volunteering to have his powers taken by Snark, so I think he has truly disappeared to go live a normal life. Good for him. This next man is iconic. Literally, his name is Icon. He appeared in 2 issues, Excalibur 59 and 60. He was a Wakandan biochemist who experimented on himself in their advanced labs. He ended up giving himself the ability to turn himself and others into wood. With his newfound power, he set his eyes on the Wakandan throne. He had the idea in his head that Black Panther did not respect him as a scientist. One night during a celebration, Icon shows up and starts turning people to wood. Luckily, the Avengers are in attendance, something Icon did not plan for. He does have an ace up his sleeve. When someone is turned into wood, they are then under his control. Black Panther will not let the Avengers attack the wooden people as they are his subjects. But worry not, out of nowhere comes this guy called Jungle Man to distract Icon, giving the Avengers their moment to start the fight. Only Icon surrenders very quickly. See, his whole plan rested on taking the throne quickly through fear, because the turning to wood thing only lasts an hour. The change back makes him pass out and he's carried away by Black Panther. That's all, folks. He was an old man, so maybe natural causes took him out, but he is literally never seen again. Cold Heart, a villain with a point. Sadly, she hasn't been seen since Avengers Standoff. Cold Heart has had a tragic life. Her son was caught in the crossfire of a hero and villain's battle and sadly passed away. From that day on, the heartbroken mother has hated heroes because she believes they never get a proper punishment for when they level a city during a fight and innocent lives are lost. She has a point. To get her revenge on the heroes of the world, she stole her costume from the government agency she worked for. Her suit is bulletproof and comes with 2 cryonic swords that can freeze anything they touch. She primarily fights Spider-Man, and he is one of the only heroes that has survived her pursuit of them. She was inspired by his good nature and genuine want to protect civilian lives that she let him go. She eventually lands herself in prison, but escapes in New Avengers. This woman is tough. She survived the Stamford explosion and then ends up in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Pleasant Hill prison, eventually joining in on the massive Avengers Standoff battle. And then we haven't seen her since. She is a highly trained martial artist and swordswoman, suggesting that she was probably a field agent of some sort when she worked at the agency. So maybe she just slipped away and is living a quiet life again.
Number 10. Yara Flor. Yara Flor is destined to become the new Wonder Woman. At least that is what Future State would have us believe. For now though, in the Prime Earth continuity, she is just coming into her own and being introduced to us as a hero, figuring out as well what that means for her as our Wonder Girl. Yara herself, like Wonder Woman before her, is also a demigod. In Future State we learned that while her mother was a mortal woman, her father was a Brazilian river god. Yara is an Amazonian in 2 ways, being from the Amazon and also being an Amazon of the Amazons. She is not from Themyscira like Diana, but instead from the Amazonian rainforest. We've seen the potential of Yara via her appearance in Future State, but currently she is not at her full power levels just yet, as she doesn't have the same amount of experience as her future self. Like Diana, she is also a skilled combatant and has enhanced strength and speed due to her heritage. Number 9. Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill isn't someone you'd initially think of when you think of Immortal, but he is down with the Immortals of Asgard, and so I think we can include him too. Also add in the fact that he is a cyborg, and you have a Beta Ray Bill that just won't quit. In most cases at least. In his Thor form, Beta Ray Bill becomes one of the toughest heroes around, not only known for his strength but also his durability. He is immune to disease and sickness and becomes pretty much immortal in that form. Being at the level of strength and capability when it comes to his power levels also makes him one of the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe, even though he might not be the one that you think of first. Still, I'm really happy I put Beta Ray Bill on this list because I feel like we never talk about him enough. Poor Bill. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, I have a lot more immortal, powerful heroes that I want to tell you about. So be sure to let us know you are loving it by giving this video a thumbs up. And shout out in the comments, be like part 2, maybe we'll do a part 2. Number 8. Orion. Orion is one of the new gods and also the son of Darkseid. But just because his dad is one of the greatest villains of all time when it comes to the DC universe doesn't mean that he can't be a hero, which is ultimately what Orion is, preferring to fight on the side of good. Although this doesn't mean that he never has conflicts with other superheroes in the DC universe, because that does happen from time to time, with Orion arguing that his approach to heroism in certain cases is superior. Orion is an amazingly skilled fighter and leader who is known for his super strength, durability, and stamina. He also is immortal like his father, and because Darkseid has also been established as a constant in the DC universe, therefore invulnerable from ever being permanently defeated, we can discern that Orion likely has a similar thing going on, being descended from Darkseid as he is. Number 7. Icarus. I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention one Eternal on this list. Eternals are known for their immortality. I mean, it's kinda in the name. Eternal. We call them eternal because they are. They have lived on Earth for 1 million years at this point or more, Icarus included. They are beings who were created by the Celestials, but whose purpose remained a great mystery in the comics for a long time. Initially though, it seemed that the Celestials had created them to kind of be Earth's heroes, but also because they kind of enjoyed messing with species on other worlds, which was exactly what they were doing with humanity when they created both the Eternals and their initial sworn enemies, the Deviants. Icarus, like himself, is often thought of as being the Superman equivalent of the group. Icarus is well known for his durability, strength, flight, and energy manipulation and energy beams, including heat vision as a form of. Icarus is strong enough to take on Thanos one-on-one and also possesses the ability to heal himself. Like other Eternals, he also has the capability to teleport, though he actually prefers not to do that, and he possesses low-level psionic abilities that allow him to communicate telepathically, as well as more advanced telekinetic abilities. Number 6. Supergirl. Like her cousin Kal-El, Supergirl is often perceived as being basically immortal. In Future State, we saw an alternate future where Kara left Earth and lived well into the future. At the end of her Future State limited series, Kara Zor-El Superwoman, Supergirl did inevitably die, but we don't really know what from. It could have eventually been that she succumbed to old age after living well into the future and beyond, or it could be that she died protecting the Eternal Garden and community there that she created and had fostered. I would err on the side of the latter just because of how immortal Kara already seemed in that series. And that's not the only alternate reality where we've seen Kryptonians living well into the future, virtually untouched by age. There have been countless other realities, including that of DC 1 million, where we've seen heroes like Superman live well beyond normal years, becoming basically a sun-powered god. So if this is true for Clark based on his physiology, it must also be a possibility for Kara as well. Number 5. Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is still a woman that can be killed, but she has also been known as a demigod in the comics before, with one origin for her making her the daughter of Hippolyta, the Queen of Amazons, and Zeus, a god of Olympus. Really, the god of Olympus. More recently, during the events of Dark Knight's death metal, Diana was also raised up to become an omnipotent god amidst the stars, transcended into an otherworldly being and leaving our earthly plane behind, at least for a while. Diana would get a glimpse into a potential future, giving us the Future State line, world, and event. Wonder Woman is known for being one of the fiercest and strongest fighters amongst the Amazons and in the world of DC besides. Number 4. Cersei. Probably one of the most powerful Eternals around, and definitely one of the few with the greatest staying power in the comics, is Cersei. So she's not only immortal as an Eternal, but also immortal in terms of her appearance in the comics. Cersei is introduced to us as one of the members of the Eternals who most loves humanity in the MCU film Eternals, and the same can be said for her in the comics. There she is also known as one of the most sociable Eternals, who also appreciates a really good party. In fact, when she was tricked into believing she was human, this was kind of what her whole world centered around. She became like all about parties. When it comes to her power levels, Cersei is often seen as specializing in the power of transmutation. In the comics, this has never been restricted to non-organic matter either, and also gives Cersei the power to heal. As an Eternal, she not only possesses this power, but also has complete control over every molecule of her being, making her quite durable and quite hard to kill. Even when Eternals are killed as well, they're resurrected, meaning they can never really die. Not only that, but Cersei can fly, teleport, and has super strength, and is telepathic and telekinetic. She's really got a lot of powers. Like most Eternals. That is something that I feel like we didn't really see in the movie, but in the comics, they're all pretty OP. Number 3, Hulk. Hulk is definitely one of the most powerful heroes around in Marvel Comics. Often he is well known for his massive amount of strength and ability to smash or destroy just about anything he sets his mind to wrecking. Lately, however, we saw a deep dive into the character of the Hulk and Bruce Banner, who are also often described as being two separate beings kind of sharing one existence. In Immortal Hulk, we also learn not only that Hulk is extremely complex, but also that he's, well, you may have guessed it, immortal. Granted, this very revelation was something pulled from his original origin, where it was initially explained that at night the Hulk would basically take over, and because of this, whenever night fell, if Bruce Banner had been killed, then Hulk would be resurrected, bringing Bruce back with him. If you are a Hulk fan and you haven't yet read Immortal Hulk, by the way, it's definitely a must read, so go do that. And you'll see what I'm talking about with all this immortal stuff. If you didn't already know, because I feel like, you know, if you've been a Hulk fan for a long time, then you probably were like, I mean, it makes sense. Number 2, Jean Grey. Jean has died a lot, and I mean a lot, and yet she always comes back. If that isn't immortality, I do not know what is. Even when she has been dead for years, she still returns. A big part of what makes her so indestructible is how much the Phoenix Force loves her and often sees her as its preferred host. I guess except for the whole Phoenix tournament thing, that really threw my whole understanding of the Jean-Phoenix connection for a loop. As a superhero, Jean is one of the most powerful around, but often chooses to show restraint when it comes to her abilities unless she is really needed to set things right. She's just kinda too OP as well. She is an Omega level telepath and an extremely powerful telekinetic. Number 1, Superman. One of the most immortal of the immortals out there, and one of the most powerful is Superman, who has been established as immortal as long as he's under a yellow sun. Granted, his immortality is a little bit conditional, but when it comes to being a powerhouse, Superman is undisputedly one of the best and most established in comics today. I mean, they kinda had to nail down his powers and give him weaknesses to make his struggles more grounded. That's how unstoppable he initially was, back when his superpowers were basically whatever he needed them to be in order to save the day and solve problems. Superman has also died before, but has pretty much always come back, and following the death of Superman, we also learned that due to Kryptonian technology, even this publicized and sensationalized death would most definitely not be a permanent thing. A very powerful factor that Superman also possesses when it comes to his immortality is how popular he is, evidently. So it'd be really hard to kill Superman because we'd all be like, no! No one would accept it. We'd all be like, just tearing our hair out and beating our chest, would be like, unacceptable.
Lex Luthor. Superman's arch nemesis has been a big deal for nearly a century, remaining at the top of his league as one of the most recognizable villains in all of DC, and that's thanks to his hidden superpower, the ability to keep up with the times. When Lex first started out in the villain league, he was far different from the Luthor we've all come to know and love. In fact, he went by Alexi Luthor and even started out with red hair. Funny enough, Lex's baldness can be attributed to an art mistake where the penciler confused Lex with the bald and bulkier Ultra Humanite, giving us the look that Lex would rock for the rest of his existence. Now as time went on, he transformed from just a mad scientist into this evil businessman type. He still had this evil genius side to him, but now he had a big corporation doing his dirty work, which made him a more complex villain, adding depth by showing a different kind of intelligence and ambition. Now post-Crisis, the modern Lex is a mix of all these versions. He's an evil genius with the resources of a huge corporation, giving him a blend of sophistication and power. Next up is Magneto. For a character that started off as basically a knockoff to Dr. Doom, Magneto has certainly come a long way from being perceived as just a mere villain. Of course, at first glance, he might seem like a bad guy bent on destroying humans, but his journey is deeper than that. His haunting origin story led him to believe that mutants should rule, given how humans treated mutants so poorly. As time rolled on, Magneto's story got twisty. Sometimes he teamed up with the good guys, showing a different side. He even began understanding the importance of working together with humans, at least on occasion. His character evolved, showcasing moments of empathy and understanding. I mean, sure, he still does clash with the X-Men, but his motivations and actions have changed. He's a prime example of a villain who's undergone a roller coaster journey, blurring the lines between good and bad. If you're enjoying enjoying the video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. Jason Todd. When this iteration of Robin first popped up in Batman comics, he was just a redhead acrobat sidekick, which is a far cry from the anti-hero we know today. His origin story changed over time from being a determined kid wanting to be Batman's sidekick to having a more darker, tragic past after Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now this guy wasn't just another Robin. He was more intense and pretty rough with bad guys, sometimes even crossing Batman's line. Now sadly, his impulsive nature led to his tragic end in A Death in the Family, where Joker beat him with a crowbar. This hit Batman hard, and Jason's death became a warning for future Robins about the dangers of their job. But after this, he miraculously came back to life and took up the mantle of the Red Hood. As the Red Hood, he went down a dark path, disagreeing with Batman's crime-fighting methods and becoming way more ruthless with criminals. Now over time, he's changed, becoming a better team player, leading his own squads, and even patching things up with Bruce Wayne. He's mellowed out a bit from his etchier days as the Red Hood, and is working to be a hero in his own way, even earning Batman's trust back. Next up is Sandman. William Baker, better known by his alias as Flint Marko, has most definitely come a long way. Starting out as just another super-powered thief, slowly but surely his character became fleshed out with a tragic backstory with a motive to justify his actions that would even make a grown man cry, or at least a young AJ. Baker has even been able to reform over the years, growing into a formidable anti-hero, which is a far cry from his initial appearance as a two-dimensional robber that got beaten by Spidey with a vacuum cleaner. Now, before all that, in his childhood, his dad wasn't around, his mom struggled with substance abuse, and bullies made his life miserable. When he finally stood up for himself, he got a taste for power, and that's when things took a turn. Flint started being a bully himself, letting others do his work because school wasn't his thing, but his path got even rockier when he messed with football games for money and then got kicked out of school. Then came his stint in prison, but that didn't hold him for long. After he escaped, he ended up in a nuclear test and survived, gaining these insane sand powers. Instead of turning his life around though, he chose the wrong path again, becoming the Sandman, using his powers for crime. Boy was he good at it, even being a founding member of the Sinister Six and the Fantastic Four. Now Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, a film which most people would rather forget happened, revealed that all his villainy had been an attempt to save his terminally ill daughter, adding a touch of humanity to justify his actions and proving that deep down he's not such a bad guy. In fact, he would go on to fight alongside heroes in the Outlaws and the Wild Pack, and even as a reserve Avenger. While he continues to work against the law, there's still that spark of good which comes out every now and then. Catwoman. Ever since her debut in Batman comics, she's undergone some major transformations, making her one of the most dynamically changing villains. Initially seen as a Gotham baddie, she's now more of an anti-hero. She's been part of different groups like the Justice League and the Outsiders, proving that she's not all bad, especially after her and Batman's rocky engagement. Her backstory's been all over the place too. Before a big DC event, she had memory loss from a plane crash, but then another story, she was a dominatrix turned burglar, which is definitely crazy. Now one huge change came in 2015 when she smooched another Catwoman, which was a huge deal for the LGBTQ+ community and representation in comics. Now sometimes in her backstory she knows her parents, other times she grows up in an orphanage. Her sister's in and out of the picture depending on which story you read. And her moral code is definitely all over the place. Sometimes she's not into eliminating people at all, but other times when her loved ones are in danger, she is quick to throw down. Black Adam. He started off as a baddie due to his family mess. He claimed that he was innocent in some serious stuff involving Captain Marvel's folks, and it turned out that he wasn't the guilty party. But even with his newfound good guy claim, he ended up causing trouble with the Justice Society, teaming up with the bad guys at first, the Injustice League. Later on, after some brain surgery to remove a tumor, he switched sides again, helping the good guys beat the bad ones. He even helped the Justice Society in a huge fight against this demon dude. Now they were weary about letting him join the team because of his super shady past, but eventually they gave him a chance. The thing is, he couldn't shake his old ways entirely. He and some pals went a bit too extreme, deciding to take justice into their own hands by offing a terrorist, which caused a huge fight in the Justice Society again. Even though he had moments of being a hero, his past just kept on haunting him. He had ups and downs, sometimes doing good, sometimes causing chaos, but lately he's been leaning more towards the hero stuff, teaming up with big leagues like the Justice League. But the big question hanging over him is whether he'll stay on the hero path or slip back into his dark side. Thanos, the big baddie from the Marvel Universe, didn't always look the same or act the same in comics or in movies. When he first popped up in the 70s, he was this skinny, less wrinkly purple guy, but as time passed, artists beefed him up to resemble the much bulkier villain we recognize today. This dude didn't just change physically though. He started out as a shady character, working behind the scenes and using gadgets for power, but later he upgraded to this super powerful being wielding insane cosmic abilities, culminating in the infamous Snap. But he didn't always stay a full-time bad guy. Sometimes he teamed up with the good guys, which was pretty weird. And in a comic series called Infinity, he even got his own squad of followers, making him way more organized in his evil deeds. They did lots of changes for the movies too. In Infinity War, Thanos wasn't just this evil guy for the sake of it. He had the idea to make the universe better by destroying half of anything, which was pretty crazy. Dr. Doom, usually the thorn in the side of Fantastic Four, but once in a blue moon, he pulls off a move that makes you think twice about his villainous ways. In this wild Marvel showdown called Secret Wars in 2015, Doom did the unthinkable, admitting that Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic himself, could have done a better job with all the power Doom had, which is super shocking considering it's coming from Dr. Doom. Even more mind-blowing, Doom gave up his crazy cosmic powers to Reed, and in return, Reed fixed Doom's messed up face. Now, after this whole power swap, Doom went all in to be a good guy. Yeah, that's right. When Tony was out of action because of Captain Marvel, Doom took on the Iron Man gig. And guess what? He was not pretending. He genuinely wanted to be a hero, which is just insane to think about. But even for a hot minute, he had even teamed up with the Human Torch and the Thing, fighting the good fight. Major Disaster. Once a not so popular green baddie, Major Disaster surprised everyone by flipping the script and joining the Justice League of America. Back in the day, he was like this forgotten action figure buried deep in the toy chest, a Z-list villain that nobody really cared about. But then, he became a Justice League member during the Joe Kelly and Doug Mankey's JLA run, and the shockwaves were astronomical. A villain teaming up with the heroes was major eyebrow-raising material. At first, the League gave him the side eye, as expected, trust issues, you know, but slowly but surely they warmed up to him. This was Major Disaster's shining moment in the big leagues. Fans cheered for his unexpected turnaround. But then, eventually, after the story arc, he panicked. He just vanished. Fans were pretty bummed because they wanted more, but he's been missing in action ever since. Mr. Freeze, initially known as Dr. Victor Fries or Mr. Zero, started off as a typical icy antagonist in the world of comic books. But let me tell you, his story took a wild turn in 1992 with that Batman the Animated Series episode called Heart of Ice. You see, before that, it was just your run-of-the-mill baddie chilling out in the background of Batman's world, but then something magical happened. The animated series reimagined Mr. Freeze, giving him depth that we'd never seen before. And his voice, oh man, he had this deep, haunting voice that made you just feel his pain. Suddenly, Freeze wasn't just freezing Gotham, he was a guy wrecked by sadness and revenge. The core of this story revolved around his wife, Nora. Freeze was desperately trying to save her from a terminal illness, but big corporate greed and a tragic lab accident with cryogenic stuff turned him into a guy who can't survive outside of an ice suit. But then things got icy in a bad way. Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze in that Batman and Robin movie? Yeah, the one with all the cold puns like chill out and ice to meet you. It was a goofy take that turned Freeze into a walking joke, and unfortunately that's what many folks still remember him as to this day. In the comics, Freeze stayed close to the serious version from the animated series until the New 52 reboot shook things around. Scott Snyder took Freeze in a different direction, making him way less sympathetic by altering his backstory. Suddenly Nora wasn't his wife anymore, just some girl with a made-up illness, and the guy who pulled the plug on his research, surprise surprise, it was none other than Bruce Wayne himself, which was a twist that made everyone involved a lot less likable. So while some chop him up as just a dude with the freeze ray, he's actually way cooler than that. Pun intended.
Starting off this list supremely strong, we are talking about Mr. Sinister. What makes Mr. Sinister so great? Well, he's not really just one person anymore, but many different people kinda all combined together, or well, split, but you know, all joined by the fact that they're all a version of Sinister. Are you confused yet? Don't be. Allow me to explain. A while ago in the comics, we learned that while we believed that Nathaniel Essex had basically transformed into Mr. Sinister, it turned out that Nathaniel Essex had actually kinda just died, and Mr. Sinister had instead taken his place. And then we learned it wasn't just Mr. Sinister who was created to do this, but instead 4 clones total, each one different with their own focus in terms of the answer to evolution, which means that Sinister is so much more than Sinister at this point. That plus his own recent accomplishment of conquering all mutants and creating his own reality, which was shaped in his own image and sins of Sinister, is what makes him so powerful. Basically, don't underestimate Sinister. Speaking of those who aren't what they seem, Brother Blood recently claimed to have been turning over over a new leaf during his appearance in the Titan series. Now, I wasn't buying his claims myself though, because I know just how dastardly and dangerous this villain can be. Although that being said, while I didn't believe he'd come over to the side of good, I was excited to see him. I don't think Brother Blood ever gets enough love, so I'm always super excited to see him appear in the comics. Brother Blood has been a long-standing Titans villain, and he's quite frightening, to be honest with you. Brother Blood's powers allow him to take complete control of anyone whose blood he possesses. So if he ended up with a lot of superpowered blood on his hands, you can imagine just how unstoppable he could be. Or not even on his hands, just in his possession. This next villain could have been iconic due to how old he is in comic book history, but unfortunately, his first story in the comics left him without any way to continue his career of crime at that time. We're talking about one of the first mutant villains to have ever appeared, the X-Men villain, Vanisher. Vanisher made his first appearance in issue number 2 of the X-Men, making him the second mutant villain to ever appear in X-Men comics. Unless you count, I guess, Professor X as the well-meaning X-Men villain he sometimes is. Issue number 1 saw the X-Men go up against Magneto. Issue number 2 saw them take on the Vanisher, who due to his teleportation abilities, which he also gets from being a mutant, was seemingly unstoppable. The issue was the team wasn't really strong enough to know how to handle his power set, especially since they didn't have anyone who could do anything similar to Vanisher. So in essence, Vanisher gave the entire X-Men team a run for their money in his very first appearance. In the end, Charles is forced to intervene and defeat Vanisher by wiping his memory so that he doesn't even remember having powers. Yikes, brutal. Seriously though, who was the real villain there? Just saying. Charles, when I read him do that, I was like, Charles, please, ruin this entire man's life. I don't think Vanisher even remembers his name after that. He's like, I don't even know who I am. Transitioning over to another character that we really don't talk about enough on the channel, I'm focusing this point on Golden Glider. Who is Golden Glider? Leonard Snart's sister, Lisa. While in The Flash she is given her name by Cisco after he makes a golden gun for her, in the comics she actually gets her name kind of from her own abilities, which allow her to astral project, and while in her astral state move at an insane speed, just gliding around. Hence why she's a good Flash villain. Not only that, but Lisa Snart can use her powers to also cancel out the Speed Force temporarily. Still pretty impressive, even if it's temporary. If Golden Glider is one of the most underappreciated villains on the Rogues team, or Rogues affiliated anyways, depending on the story and the continuity, Sandman is one of those members of the Sinister Six, who often falls by the wayside as well. However, Sandman is actually insanely powerful and terrifying if you ask me. He can control the sand he's made up of and use it to increase his mass, his size, and strength significantly, making him more dangerous than most other human-sized villains that are out there. He can also easily escape, as he can reduce his size and density as well, making it easier for him to get away, shrink up, and just slither off his sand. He can also increase his density, making him extremely durable. He's also virtually immortal now that he's all sand, and he doesn't require food or drink to live, or even, honestly, air to breathe. In a similar vein to Sandman, we have Clayface. Clayface comes to us not from Marvel, but instead from DC, and is primarily known as a Batman villain. He can shapeshift as well, making him a hard character for someone like Batman to deal with. Batman is typically known for his deduction skills, and as a shapeshifter, Clayface is harder therefore for Batman to track down. This is also why Clayface is such a strong ally to Batman as well, during the times when Batman did manage to reform and recruit Basil to the Bat family. While people might consider Clayface as more of a joke villain somewhat, in part thanks to his marvelous appearance in the hilarious Harley Quinn animated series as a member of Harley's crew, the fact remains that his abilities are impressive, including size alteration, density control, shapeshifting, super strength, super durability, and Carlo can even mimic people's powers because he adopts not just their appearance and their likeness and their voice, but also basically is just copying their DNA. So yeah, he can have superpowers too. Clayface and Sandman are definitely both impressive for their power set, but when it comes to fighting prowess, this next villain is honestly pretty hard to beat. Not only that, but he is insanely intelligent, which also helps him to navigate more challenging fights where he might be at a disadvantage going in. We're talking about Tony Masters' Taskmaster. While Taskmaster might have a kind of goofy name, his power set is honestly pretty impressive. He has photographic reflexes. What does that mean? It it allows him to learn any style of fighting or martial arts simply by watching it. His abilities don't end there either. He can even learn other useful physical skills, such as sleight of hand, just by observing them. If you're wondering how I could put someone like Taskmaster above someone like Clayface, who not only can shapeshift but also can mimic other heroes and villains' powers, it's because while Taskmaster isn't himself as powerful, he has defeated other characters who are much more powerful than he is, or even, I would say, Clayface is. For example, when he used his tactical skills, his smart planning, and sense of prediction to defeat Hyperion, who's basically like a version of Superman but with Marvel Comics, or one of their versions of Superman. Speaking of villains with goofy names, Captain Cold is Leonard Snart. He is not one goofy name, but kind of two goofy names, both his villain mantle and his civilian name, Captain Cold and Leonard Snart. And while he might have goofy names and kind of a goofy look and kind of a goofy weapon, he's still actually pretty effective as a Flash villain. That is in great part due to his power set or equipment being the opposite of his rivals, the Flash. While the Flash can obviously move extremely fast, Cold can slow everything down thanks to his power over temperature, freezing basically everything around him. Not only that, but Snart is also a leader, which means he doesn't usually work alone, often having his other teammates on the rogues to back him up. He's cunning, he's resourceful, and he's also a genius as well. The next villain is another one that I feel often doesn't get hyped enough for her power. We're talking about Mystique. Mystique might not be on the level of other Marvel villains like Apocalypse or Galactus or Hela even, but she's not someone that you should underestimate either. Most people think of her as being a lower level villain in terms of her power set because she's just a shapeshifter. I don't know what it is, but I think in general we just don't consider shapeshifting to be that powerful of an ability. But here's the thing, even though as of right now she is on a list with other shapeshifters who some may even be surprised to see I've put her above, the fact is that Mystique is one of the best shapeshifters around because she doesn't leave stuff up to chance. She doesn't just rely on her power set. Unlike Sandman for a long time, she wasn't able to shapeshift into just any size or shape or anything. Typically she was kind of limited to humans or humanoid beings and was reserved to a shape that shared the same mass as herself, having to stretch herself out or condense her mass depending on the size of the individual that she was impersonating. She also couldn't copy straight DNA, so she wouldn't have the powers nor even the vocal cords, to be honest, of the person that she was mimicking. So Mystique actually had to make up for all of that with her own skill sets, making her a master impersonator and actor, able to convince you she's pretty much anyone thanks to her observational skills and the hard work that she puts in. And to me, I not only think that's more impressive, I also think that honestly makes her more powerful. Because even if, you know, something were to happen, she didn't have her powers, she would still be pretty OP. This next villain also gets a bad, or should I say good, rep from people believing that he is the weaker version of his counterpart. We're talking about Bizarro, the Bizarro clone or possibly otherworldly reflection of Superman, depending on the origin that you're going with and the story that we're referring to, because there's been many different Bizarros throughout the years. Bizarro, however, overall might not always be as brilliant or as beautiful as Superman, although sometimes he is pretty brilliant, but he's still got similar powers to one of the most powerful superheroes of all time in all of comic book history, Superman. And that should be enough for me to crown him with our top spot, so hats off to you, Bizarro.
Up first is someone who should have received double exposure considering he fought both Spider-Man and the X-Men, and I love him, and he actually did beat Spider-Man, Dr. Karl Lykos, also known by the cooler name Sauron. He's a two-part act. He starts out as Dr. Lykos, a semi-regular human geneticist that must absorb the life force of living things to survive. Then the magic happens when he absorbs the life force of a mutant. That's when he turns into his fursona Sauron, a pterodactyl-like humanoid. So like body of a man but green and ripped, and a pterodactyl head, tail, and wings. Now Dr. Lykos is not perfect, but he's also not really a villain yet. That's Sauron. His personality gets distorted when he shifts. Sauron is known for his super strength, hypnotic ability, and oddly enough, a meme. He appeared in Spider-Man and the X-Men, and of course it was a conversation with our sarcastic spider that gave us this gem. Spider-Man, in disbelief, asks Sauron why he turns people into dinosaurs when he could instead be using his DNA rewriting abilities to cure cancer, to which Sauron responds, and I quote, "But I don't want to cure cancer, I want to turn people into dinosaurs." Incredible. No notes, buddy. I am so obsessed with this line, but please let me know in the comments down below your favorite superhero quote. Up next is Beetle, and he has beef with everybody. For reference, he's brawled with the Avengers, Daredevil, Spidey, of course, the Fantastic Four, and Iron Man. To be fair to Beetle, the mask has been donned by about 7 different people. Spidey's Beetle was Abner Jenkins. What tragedy caused his sudden switch to villainhood? He was bored and poor. To rephrase, he was a talented mechanic working for an aircraft producer, but the job didn't pay very well and it just kinda was not that interesting to him. In search of something more, he decided the best way to gain international recognition was to make a suit of armor, call himself Beetle, and try to beat half of the Fantastic Four. Go big or go home. One of his big ideas involved kidnapping Dory Evans, the Human Torch's girlfriend. This plan was foiled by, of course, Spider-Man. Next villain was actually commissioned by someone we already know, J. Jonah Jameson. Jameson loves nothing more than seeing Spider-Man suffer, so much so that he commissioned a robotic expert, Spencer Smythe, to create the now iconic Spider Slayers. The first couple rounds of the robot suits, they had designs that had very strong coils to trap Spider-Man, and they were equipped with the ability to track spider DNA. Anything with spider DNA. This went just about as well as you're thinking. Spidey led the villain into a different spider exhibit, and the suit promptly had a breakdown. The first Smythe did make it to suit 6 before it was ultimately his undoing. Then his son took up the mantle, Mr. Alistair Smythe, now hating Spider-Man to the extreme because in a roundabout way, Spidey killed his dad. He got busy and refused to give up. He clocked over 15 different versions of the Spider Slayer's suits before a prison riot gone wrong resulted in a fight with Spider-Man in which Alistair was impaled on his own blade. Hydro Man is a Spidey-made problem. Hydro Man started out as a normal guy, Morris Bench. He was just a guy making a living working on cargo ships. One of the ships was holding a very powerful experimental generator, which are never words you want to hear living in this universe. The generator was being lowered into the ocean for testing, and as luck would have it, Morris Bench got knocked overboard by Spider-Man. Upon rescue, poor Morris began to sweat, or so he thought. One pub trip later, and to his shock, he discovered that he could turn himself into water. Though we have yet to see Hydro Man in the MCU, the water elemental in 2019's Spider-Man Far From Home is a close second. Producer Eric Carroll stated that he's of course inspired by a B-list Spider-Man villain called Hydro Man. Though the elementals turned out to be fake, a couple were based on very real villains, in the Spider-Man universe anyway. I'm not saying I agree with our next villain, but I can't deny that she has a point. Coldheart, she's a skilled swordswoman, martial artist, and owner of 2 cryonic swords that freeze objects instantly. Coldheart believes that superheroes commit crimes against humanity too great to be ignored. When a hero saves a city, or sometimes even a planet, it comes with a lot of destruction and innocent civilian casualties. One of these civilian casualties once was what caused Kateri Deserantos to turn into Coldheart. Her son Joey was killed in a brawl between an unnamed villain and hero. Since that day, Kateri vowed to get revenge on the superheroes of the world. It's implied that she had acted out her revenge on a few heroes using a suit provided to her by the agency she was working for. She did go after Spider-Man, but stopped her pursuit after Spider-Man saved another villain's child. The child begged her to spare him, and he quite literally thawed her heart. What thawed mine was the Christmas edition for Miss Coldheart and the story of her arrest. It's no secret this woman has been through it, and she misses her son so much that she still gives him Christmas presents. Spider-Man tracked Coldheart to her apartment, seeing her through the window gifting presents to her family. She was shortly arrested after, and when Spider-Man entered the premises, he discovered that her family was actually inanimate dolls. Feeling sorry for her, he left a gift at her prison window, a framed photo of her family. Our next foe not only fought Spider-Man physically, but also mentally. Miles Warren, later Jackal, was a biochemistry professor at Empire State University. While teaching there, he fell in love with his student, Gwen Stacy, Spider-Man's girlfriend at the time. When Gwen Stacy did unfortunately die, Miles blamed Spider-Man and began attempting to clone humans. This is when he turned into the villain Jackal. He worked to create clones of Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker, and through analyzing Peter's cells, he discovered that Peter was Spider-Man. He succeeded in creating a whole horrible version of Gwen that could degenerate any living thing she touched. He also created a clone of himself that Spider-Man had to defeat to save his best friend. Jackal is incredibly smart, strong, and agile. One of my personal favorite villains on this list is White Rabbit, civilian name Lorena Dodson. She had a good life. She grew up in a wealthy family. It was just a bit boring for her. She married a significantly older man at age 25, which ended up turning into the catalyst for her life of crime. She killed her husband and used the inheritance she received from the accident to purchase all the tech she'd need for her new crime-filled lifestyle. White Rabbit is incredibly intelligent and grew up reading to escape her mundane life. The novels later inspired her criminal activities. She ended up planning a Lewis Carroll-inspired robbing spree with popular Spider-Man villain Venom. Why Lewis Carroll? He wrote Alice in Wonderland, and she's White Rabbit, one of the characters. Some of her other robberies include fast food restaurants and book fairs. I love her, she's camp, and I'm obsessed. She later was hired as part of a villain army to kill, surprisingly not Spider-Man, but Mr. Negative. Mr. Negative originated out of a gang in China called the Snakeheads, which was heavily involved in human trafficking. During a trip in which he was helping transport slaves from China to the USA, the ship crashed and he stole the identity of Martin Lee, a deceased slave. Upon arriving in New York, the now Martin Lee went in search of fellow snakeheads in the city, but they were all deceased. He was captured and brought to a chemist that performs horribly illegal and mostly fatal tests on vulnerable individuals. The current tests are for a substance called D-Light, which gives survivors powers related to the Dark Forest. For Mr. Negative, that means super strength, reflexes, and a healing touch, as well as a corrupting/brainwashing touch. Despite his name though, technically he's not all negative. Martin Lee still lives within Mr. Negative and is kinda like the kind alter ego, whereas Mr. Negative is the demonic, later turned New York crime boss half of him. As to why he was sought after by a mini villain army, when another Spider-Man villain, the Hood, aims to rule New York, specifically the criminal underworld, Negative does not yield, and it basically starts a turf war. Mr. Negative later went on to help power up another Spider-Man villain known as Hammerhead. Hammerhead's life has never been easy. He was hit in the head with a hammer as a child by his father. He later ended his father's life in order to join a mob. His next head-related injury came from an alley fight. His skull was shattered and then replaced with one made of steel. That's kind of where he got the name the first time. The guy went through a series of gang wars before getting to his next head injury, this one being a gunshot through the back of his head. Mr. Negative, remember him? He offered to replace Hammerhead's whole upper skeleton with one made of adamantium, a practically indestructible material. Hammerhead now enjoys super strength and of course, durability. Hammerhead's last injury actually happened right beside another extremely popular Spider-Man villain, Black Cat. She was head of her own gang at one point, and Hammerhead was her second in command. I am biased because I am a cat person, and Black Cat has been my favorite Superman villain since I was a little girl. Honestly, I'm shocked she hasn't officially shown up yet. There have been many tries to get her on the silver screen, most recently the cancelled film Silver and Black. A character was introduced in the Amazing Spider-Man film series that was intended to become Black Cat, but the third movie was never made. Black Cat is most known for her bad luck. With the average black house cat, you have nothing to worry about. With her though, use a 10-foot pole. She had cyber enhancements done to her body that literally affect whether or not you will experience bad luck. Her suit has sharp claws, enhanced strength, and she is highly skilled in many martial arts. She takes after her father, a master thief who encouraged her to always be the best version of herself.
Number 10. The Spectre. Let's start off with a different type of immortality, one coming from a character who was never mortal to begin with. Kinda. The Spectre first appeared in More Fun Comics number 52 back in 1940. Now the Spectre, because of this, dates all the way back to the Golden Age. At first the Spectre was Jim Corrigan, a man whose soul was denied entry into the afterlife by a being known as the Voice, and is instead sent back to fight evil. This, however, was after he was murdered. He would create a costume and call himself the Spectre. However, the version fans would become more familiar with, and who would become the more iconic, was the Silver Age version, which would tweak the Spectre to a spirit of vengeance, who would possess hosts and have them act as a vessel for delivering his brutal brand of justice. This way, you could still also have the Jim Corrigan backstory, but the Spectre could also possess other characters, like for example, Hal Jordan. He was the Spectre after he snapped and killed the entire Green Lantern Corps and Sinestro. But it's fine, it was parallax. I mean, you'd think a cosmic being would know that, but it doesn't matter, except the retcon, so no one has to feel bad. The Spectre has waned in popularity in the modern era and isn't seen anywhere near as much as he used to be. Number 9, Franklin Richards. The son of Reed Richards and Sue Storm Richards of the Fantastic Four. Franklin possesses a terrifying Omega-level power set that has only grown over the years. Franklin first appeared in Fantastic Four Annual number 6 back in 1968 and only just became a teenager. Happy birthday. Now, Franklin's immortality is implied because, well, you'd have to jump through some hoops to explain it via his power set. But he has been placed on the same level as the Celestials and depicted as one of the last beings alive at the end of the universe, just chilling with Galactus. The Cosmic Set have already taken notice of Franklin because he can essentially do anything. Because of this, he is a very desired player on all sides because he's also so dangerous. Hence why in canon at the time of this recording, the Mutant Separatist movement wants him on their side and not allied with his human meta-powered parents, or mutate powered. He has been shown in certain future timelines to be able to kill Celestials. So in short, Franklin Richards is one to sit up and take notice of. It almost makes his superhero name Powerhouse sound cool. Almost. Number 8, the Hulk. The Hulk is currently, at the time of this recording, in a comic called The Immortal Hulk. And it means what it says. The Hulk is immortal. And this isn't the only time he has been depicted as such. In the very depressing storyline The End, he was shown to be the last person on Earth, utterly alone after his counterpart Bruce Banner died. Hulk is loneliness there is. In the Immortal Hulk, Banner cannot die properly and instead is dragged back to life by the Hulk if his form is killed. The transformations in this comic are depicted as monstrous and Cronenberg-esque, and the punishment the Hulk can take is immense, such as having his whole body cut up and separated into jars. This is while his mind stays intact and he can just watch what's happening to him. There are some truly horrifying prospects attached to proper immortality. The run started off as a really solid horror and then kind of started diving into multiple personalities and a companion who wanted to be the Hulk because he was allowed to be angry. Remember when the Hulk was sent into space? How about his friends and allies and how they fear him and never really trust him? How about how he lives life, drifting from place to place? How he's a danger to people that love him. The right to be angry. Okay. In at number 7, the Phantom Stranger. This is another cosmic entity, and this one with no origin by design. Who is the Phantom Stranger? No one knows. The Phantom Stranger first debuted in Phantom Stranger number 1, all the way back in 1952. Who is he? Well, he is a mysterious figure who just kinda shows up when he is needed. Sometimes, not all the time. He also has abilities that can do what is needed, most of the time. And of course, he is vague and cryptic, for sometimes not even he knows why he was drawn to an event. Because of how vague all of this was, not only has the Phantom Stranger been depicted very differently depending upon the writer, but he never really caught on too well. It's hard to get attached to a mystery person who shows up sometimes cuz. He did show up that one memorable issue though where Superman became a marine vampire. Never forget. Phantom Stranger, just cuz. Number 6, Hercules. Hercules plays a decently large role in the Marvel Universe. He debuted in Journey into Mystery Annual number 1 back in 1965, but that's cuz his first appearance in Avengers Forever was later said to be that of an imposter. Hercules here is immortal because he is an Olympian god in this continuity, and thus gets all the perks. No being a doorman for him. Now, Hercules had a fake-out death fairly recently at the time of this recording, where it looked as though the universe he was fighting in had ceased to exist, been destroyed. However, Amadeus Cho was able to discover that he was in fact still alive. Hercules is a good friend and rival to Thor, you know, like an anime. Hercules has also sacrificed his powers only to have them mysteriously return. Why? Who knows? Phantom Stranger. I know, different companies. Although now there may be a reason. That's what retcons are for. Number 5, Iron Man. Going for a more unconventional form of immortality with Tony Stark. Now Tony is very frail, even by human standards. For a time he needed to be in his Iron Man suit just to survive. And despite all the enhancements he built into his suits, at one point fusing them to him permanently with nanites, he was still brutally killed by his friend Captain Marvel Carol Danvers. This was during Civil War II, and it was because he didn't want to arrest people before they did crimes. However, Tony did not die. No, he managed to AI himself and then build a new body, which has led to an interesting arc in his 2018 run about AI rights. You know, like those Voyager episodes. So Tony can be immortal since he has found a way to transfer his consciousness into a digitized format, and hence make himself downloadable into robot bodies. However, every now and again, he must contend with the idea of, is he real? Does he have a soul? Are we just supposed to pretend he's real Tony and forget Civil War II happened? Probably. Number 4, Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is an interesting case because no matter the origin, there is always at least implications, if not the downright statement, that she is immortal. Be she made of clay or the daughter of Zeus. Indeed, for a time, all Amazons on Paradise Island, later renamed Themyscira, were said to be immortal. Diana is a goddess and a warrior, and a compassionate leader, walking an intriguing balance of kindness and pragmatism. That is hard for all writers to capture. And of course, she is a staple in some of those "it's a dystopian future but Wonder Woman is still here" stories. This is part of why some fans love pairing her with Superman. As while it varies, he is definitely more long-lived than most mortals. Number 3, Thor. Thor is meant to be immortal as he is a god from Asgard, but Thor keeps dying. Now, he is meant to be extremely long-lived, but for all intents and purposes immortal. However, Thor has been killed on more than one occasion, most recently by Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers. Thor's deaths are unique as well, for they play on his mythological origins. So instead of just vanishing, he goes to Valhalla or other realms and can continue to have adventures there. So there is the idea that even if he's gone, he's not fully gone, and people know where to go get him. Number 2, the Sentry. The Sentry is immortal. Don't ask how, they explain it, but just let it be. He took a serum that places molecules a second or two ahead in time. This activated a photosynthetic Superman-style response, which allowed him to store energy and power himself. Immortal. No matter how it came about, the Sentry is immortal, and that is part of what makes him, or made him, so dangerous for a long time. At least in terms of the Sentry's existence, which only dates back to 2000. He was two entities, both the Sentry and the Void, who was a dark mirror to the Sentry. So if he existed forever, so too did the Void. It was part of why the Marvel Universe was made to forget about him, which was the crux of his retconned-in origin story. At the time of this recording, his two halves have fused, reconciled. Where does it have to go from there? We shall see. And in at number 1, Dr. Manhattan. John Osterman's whole life changed after the accident that transformed him into Dr. Manhattan. He was the Watchmen universe's only superpowered man, a being of pure energy who recreated himself outside of time and space, and changed everything. Dr. Manhattan has only grown more and more distant from people and the world, largely because he can exist outside of time, seeing all of it simultaneously. He is completely immortal and omnipotent. And of course, there was Doomsday Clock, which brought the Watchmen and DC universes into proper contact with each other, and which essentially concluded with "there's gonna be more timelines and crises and a crossover." 100% worth a wait of 2 years.
Starting us off today is a little guy who goes by the name Dr. Psycho. Now, Wonder Woman, being a warrior-bound Amazon, sometimes daughter of Zeus, is one tough lady, and as you'd expect, a good chunk of her opponents are equally, if not more, physically intimidating and pack one heck of a punch. And then there's Dr. Psycho. Dr. Psycho is not physically intimidating at all. He is 3'9" with no kind of super strength. But what Dr. Psycho lacks in physicality, he makes up for in being absolutely psychotic, but also one of the strongest telepaths on the planet. Psycho can match up to Martian Manhunter in terms of his telepathic prowess, and can control multiple different minds with his powers at the same time. On top of that, he is just so incredibly sadistic. When combined with that absolute power, he can cause a bad day for even someone as capable as Wonder Woman. And before we move on, I'm curious, who are your favorite underappreciated villains in not just comics, but in any form of media? Let me know down in the comments below. But next up on the docket for today is Lord Deathman. The Japanese crime boss known as Lord Deathman has battled Batman both in American comics and in Japanese manga, using his powers to seemingly overcome death itself, able to rise from the grave no matter what his injuries are. In his first appearance in Batman 180 in May 1966, he passed away 3 times using a yogi technique to appear passed away before the final conflict, which saw him actually get struck by lightning and go on to the pearly gates. But since then, he has actually gained the real power to come back from the grave, but at the cost of having a bare bones skull for a head. His regenerative abilities are so powerful that his fluids are used to create the infamous Lazarus pits that Ra's al Ghul uses to stay young and immortal. One of the first ways Batman defeated Lord Deathman with his new powers is honestly a little out of character for the Crusader. He threw Lord Deathman off of a building into the path of an armored car, which took the criminal down just long enough for Catwoman to lock him in a safe, and then he was shot out into space, and he still somehow came back. Next up is Rogal Zar. Rogal Zar is basically an alien warlord who was actually created by the papa of Superman, Jor-El. Rogal was responsible for destroying Krypton along with Empress Gandello of the Trillium Collective. He went on to later invade the Fortress of Solitude, and he destroyed the shrunken Kryptonian city of Kandor. Now, following a series of battles with Superman and Supergirl, the pair were only able to come out on top when the Girl of Steel used a Phantom Zone projector to send Zar to the Phantom Zone. Now, all of that is pretty impressive, but what really sold a lot of people on his actual raw power was later on, when Rogal escaped from the Phantom Zone, leading an army of criminals, including General Zod, who then turned on him. He did battle with Superman, Supergirl, General Zod, John Kent, and even Crypto the dog, all at the same time, until the Thanagarians showed up and put Zar in permanent stasis. Clifford Smek was a participant in a government experiment which caused him to tap into the quantum field, which allowed him to then manipulate dark matter. Now, we have no idea what that really means because we don't even really know what dark matter is, but in DC Comics, the dark matter in Major Force's body allows him to do incredible things like absorb energy, fly, regenerate, and even create light constructs like a Green Lantern can. Another side effect of all this concentrated energy inside of him means that he will go off like a nuclear boom boom if he is cut. That on its own is a huge power boost, simply because now, as a result, most superheroes can't even risk fighting Major Force, just in case they cut him. But then, on top of that, even if he does go off, ripping apart his own body on an atomic level, the dark matter that he controls will just put Major Force back together again. And that's not even everything. Not only is Major Force a physical threat, but he is also, just to top it off, a psychological genius. Simply by talking to the Green Lantern Kyle Rayner, Major Force convinced the superhero to give up his own power ring, the source of his power, and one of the most dangerous things in the universe. Prometheus is going to be up next on our list today, and heroes and villains with no powers always seem to be some of the most powerful. It's kind of strange. Prometheus, after seeing his criminal parents pass away at the hands of the police, he vows a vendetta on any form of justice, a vendetta that would push him to be able to defeat the entire Justice League single-handedly. He shot the Martian Manhunter with a dart that turned his powers against him and set him on fire. He infected Steel's armor with a computer virus which commanded the suit to damage the Watchtower. He hypnotized the Huntress into unconsciousness, attacked Green Lantern with a neural chaff that rendered his ring useless. He trapped the angel Zariel in limbo, tricked the Flash into believing that he had planted motion-sensitive devices that would just go off if the Flash used his powers, and he defeated Batman in hand-to-hand combat, which is nuts. His origin is very similar to Batman's. After his parents were dispatched from the mortal plane, he would travel the globe training and becoming the ultimate combat machine. But he also attended all the top universities, learning as much as he could. He eventually set up a base in the Ghost Zone, and from here he built an armor that could download information on any opponent's fighting style, kind of reminiscent of Taskmaster's ability from Marvel Comics. He is kind of crazy capable, but his vendetta on any kind of justice, plus his Batman likeness, just kind of makes him a little weird to me. Next up, we got Tattooed Man. Abel Tarrant was a sailor who discovered a strange chemical that could bring drawings to life. Now, realizing the potential this chemical had, he inked his entire body with it and became the supervillain Tattooed Man. While performing crimes, his ink actually comes to life to attack his enemies. Over the years, he has fought superheroes with tattoos of tigers, cars, ships, monsters, bears, fire, planes, and dinosaurs. He can even use a tattoo of wings to give himself the ability to fly. Tattoo Man has never been considered a super serious threat, but I think he should be because he is only limited by his imagination. There is nothing stopping him from creating a tattoo of a nuclear boom boom or even a black hole. If he inked kryptonite onto his body, there's no reason that he couldn't take down Superman if he wanted to. Next up today is Dr. Sivana. It's almost ironic that some of the biggest and the strongest superheroes find their adversaries in the form of kind of creepy, somewhat old, bald men. Superman has Lex Luthor, who isn't old, but he is bald. And then for Shazam, he's got Dr. Sivana, who is indeed both old and bald. Sivana is not the kind of guy who's going to be engaging in a battle of fisticuffs, but that's fine because his strength is in the brain department. The villain doesn't have a ton of monumental feats, but one of his best comes to us in the Multiversity Thunderworld Adventures. In the opening pages of this comic, Sivana literally attacks the Rock of Eternity, which is the source of Shazam's powers and the home base for the wizard Shazam. This place has never ever been attacked for an eternity, and Sivana attacked it with a bigger rock of eternity, which is weird. He had his own Shazam-like team of superpowered children and his own multiversal duplicates helping him along. He manages to take the wizard Shazam prisoner and mine the rock for its own power, granting himself his own monstrous Shazam-like form, and it's crazy. Now, with a name like Psycho Pirate, it's easy to not take this villain too seriously, but Roger Hayden is quite the capable guy. Hayden wears a faceplate called the Medusa Mask, which can control the emotions of anyone nearby, and he staunchly believed that this was his ticket to riches and power. When heroes or the police try to stop his crime sprees, Psycho Pirate just uses his mask to overwhelm his opponents with shame, guilt, depression, or any other number of emotion. He can also make a person develop a phobia of anything he wants them to be afraid of. Like, in his debut issue, he made Dr. Fate, one of the most powerful magic users in DC Comics, develop cytophobia, aka the fear of food. And then he attacked Fate with a pizza. That's amazing! Psycho Pirate has played a huge part in some of the biggest DC comics ever, including Crisis on Infinite Earths and Infinite Crisis. If you needed more proof, Amanda Waller, the head of the Task Force X program, aka the Suicide Squad, has claimed that Psycho Pirate is one of the scariest beings in the universe, calling him, quote, a man who could make gods go mad, a man who could make the mad gods sane again. And in our second place today is Extant. Henry Hall, the brother of Donald Hall, aka Dove, started his comic book life as Hawk, being empowered alongside his brother by a Lord of Chaos and a Lord of Order who had fallen in love. Now, Henry represented chaos. Hawk and Dove together were vigilantes and were even part of the Teen Titans for a time. After the Crisis on Infinite Earths, however, in a dystopian near future that was home to a time-traveling hero called Wave Rider, Henry had become an oppressive tyrant named Monarch who ended up going back in time and fighting the modern-day heroes before he was wiped out by the Henry of the present day. I hope you can follow that because it was kind of hard for me to follow when I read it. Present-day Henry then took up the Monarch title and mantle in the modern day, becoming a villain. Now, eventually, Monarch stole the time powers from Wave Rider and then allied himself with Parallax, aka the corrupted Hal Jordan, and he took on the new villain name of Extant. While he was the front for Parallax's scheme to recreate the multiverse using alternate timelines, he tried to alter time to give himself an entire army of superheroes and found himself battling all the greatest members of the JSA. And Extant tore through them all like they were a joke, and he even used his temporal powers to age up the members of the JSA that he didn't just straight up send to the afterlife. And lastly today, I think anyone who hasn't heard of this villain before would be forgiven. When you think of the most fearsome villains, specifically the villains of Captain Marvel, otherwise known as Shazam, you may not first think about the 7-inch long sentient worm from Venus known as Mr. Mind. This diabolically evil mind-controlling worm, after the events of Infinite Crisis, would cocoon himself and then emerge as a massive monstrosity capable of manipulating reality, consuming universes, and traveling through time and space. He was described as, quote, eating years and events from this universe's history, altering the Earth with every flap of his giant wings. It took a combined effort from Booster Gold, Supernova, and Skeets to defeat Mr. Mind by trapping him inside Skeets' shell, which was fortified by the Suspendium. Then, Booster Gold threw Skeets through time with the help of Supernova to the day that he was first discovered on Earth by Dr. Sivana, and then he's trapped in a time loop forever. So they didn't actually end him or defeat him, they just trapped him. This all-powerful, mind-controlling 7-inch long worm.
Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, has been both an X-Man and an Avenger, and due to his apparent status as an external, is believed to be immortal. His powers are based around the ability to generate thermochemical energy and release it from his skin, then using that energy to propel his body through the air at fantastic speeds, effectively making him, as his name states, a human cannonball. Compared to the rest of this list, he is definitely lacking in the variety of powers department, but really, any superhero with immortality is going to be an asset, and I'd be happy to have him in my corner. Number 9. Thor is only borderline immortal, since he can be killed by Ragnarok. That said, it's not permanent because of the cycle of rebirth, and it's also a comic and he's not Ben Parker, so Thor will always be back. At least, That's what it appears to be anyway. Regardless, Thor's powers are well known, especially given his prolific role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But let's take a quick look at those. Obviously, we have superhuman strength, speed, durability, and, as long as he's eating the golden apples, stay in his physical prime. And with Mjolnir, he possesses dimensional transportation, a form of flight, and weather manipulation, and that's more than enough for me to say he's worthy of being on this list. Number 8. I am gonna call this one potentially immortal, simply because while he can die, he's also been seen living 800 years in the future in the X-Force/Cable one-shot Messiah War, so seemingly, as long as no one kills Deadpool, he'll keep living. And given this character has, or should have been killed more times than I can count, killing him doesn't seem to be enough to stop him from coming back. So, I'm gonna go ahead and add him to this list. Number 7. Yep, Superman's immortal, at least as long as he isn't killed. Although, let's be real, that hasn't stopped him yet either. Action Comics 1000 depicted a story of Superman bidding farewell to the Earth, and more specifically, his parents, shortly before it would be consumed by the sun, confirming that Superman could not die of natural causes. But also, in a sweet moment, we witness Clark question life, even now that he's billions of years old. We see him question what it was all for and why he keeps coming back. We already know Superman is strong, but that goes without saying. But even with everything he's experienced over the length of his incredibly long life, we see that the true strength of Superman is in his considerate nature and the strength of his heart, even in the last moments of the Earth. Number 6. Artemis is actually a fairly new character, not to be confused with Artemis Croc. This, fully known as Artemis of Bana Migdal, is an Amazon who left to recover the Bow of Ra, and became an ally of Red Hood and Bizarro in the process. Much like Wonder Woman, Artemis is immortal thanks to being a child of Hera, although she can be killed in battle. She basically has the same base set of powers that Wonder Woman possesses: superhuman strength, agility, stamina, durability. So if Wonder Woman can make the cut on this list, I'd say Artemis is definitely worthy. Speaking of which, number 5. While Wonder Woman has always been semi-immortal, as of her New 52 relaunch, she's actually been fully immortal. And considering she was impressively strong before that, adding the powers of superhuman speed, accelerated healing, and flight pretty much clinched her being on this list. Heck, she's even gained the powers of Ares, the god of war, so add that to her ever-growing list. And let's face it, with Gal Gadot being her new face, how can you not love her? Number 4. The Phantom Stranger is an interesting immortal, specifically in that he doesn't even seem to be killable. The guy has had his heart removed and still didn't die. His origins are as of yet unknown, but several stories have circulated, including that he's a fallen angel who chose no side between heaven and hell, and thus must walk the earth for all eternity. Another states that he is a citizen of another universe, who at the end of the previous universe passed over to the new universe. That's actually really interesting. This might be just me, but I've always loved fictionized biblical characters. Anyway, Phantom Stranger's powers include dimensional travel, Eldritch Blast, spectral sight, illusion casting, oneromancy, and reality manipulation, just to name a few. So, this guy's kind of amazing, and his only real limitation is his inability to directly intervene with, well, anything. Which kind of makes him sound like, well, some might say, God. Number 3. Yep, Dr. Manhattan couldn't be missed on this list. He's insanely powerful, seemingly impossible to harm, and can restore his body when disintegrated and be just fine. He doesn't breathe, he doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep, and just to top it all off, he's immortal. He's basically one of the most powerful beings in the DC universe. As far as being a hero goes, however, he's always kind of towed the line. As far as immortals go, he's similar to Phantom Stranger in that he seems to be disconnected from humanity and only intervenes when he feels it's necessary. So given his power levels and immortal status, and that god attitude, he's on the list. Number 2. Yeah, the fact that the Phoenix Force has ever been stopped is amazing to me. I mean, the Phoenix Force is an ancient cosmic entity that represents life that has not yet been born, and the forces of creation and destruction. It's immortal, and was born of the void between states of being. Its very birth just sounds like a god. In addition, it is the nexus of all psionic energy in all realities of the Omniverse, and is among the most feared beings in the entire universe, and is able to cut and regrow any part of the universe, as well as destroy it entirely. And given the aliases it's had over the years, the World Destroyer, the end of all that is, the Big Bang, Chaos Bringer, and Ravager of Worlds, I think it's safe to say that this immortal cosmic entity's strength is pretty boundless. Now if they could just make a good movie about it. Number 1. I'm surprised I don't hear more about the Sentry. So, the Sentry was originally named Robert Reynolds, a middle-aged man who obtained his power from a special serum he took as a boy. The result was he obtained immeasurable power, but another being came to be, known as the Void. The Void turned out to be Robert's other half, and as long as the other exists, the other can never die. They will always come back. And, in the most recent volume of Sentry from 2018, the Void and Robert have finally merged together, becoming whole once again and possessing power greater than they ever had while separate, which was already pretty much off the charts. So who knows how powerful this guy is now. That said, an immortal being who can't be stopped by a team of Avengers, gotta give it to them. That is power.
With a name like Apocalypse, yeah, you're gonna be a problem. Apocalypse can't be permanently killed. He can die. He will come back though. He's the youngest on this list, I think. The baby, he's only about 5,000 years old. Apocalypse is an external mutant. That means the resurrection thing is part of his mutation. It's not a common mutation. He's special and different. He was recruited by the Celestials to join the line of Guardians. The Celestials took him away, added some celestial tech to his body, making him even more powerful than when he started. To stay alive as long as he has, he must hibernate like a bear. Then when he wakes up, he makes a mess, then goes back to sleep. One time, he woke up and then almost immediately tried to start a war between humans and mutants and take over the world. Apocalypse can regenerate himself from a single drop of blood. He can alter his body in a variety of ways, like make himself taller. He can fly, disintegrate you with a little tap of the finger, teleport, wield magic, absorb energy, plus more. He's someone you want on your side. Thankfully, in the end, he joins the X-Men by agreeing to live on Krakoa and follow the laws there. Picture the sun, like at its blazing peak. That's a lot of energy and power, right? Now multiply that by 1,000. Not to be your 8th grade math teacher with an odd math question, I swear, I'm going somewhere. That somewhere is Surtur. Surtur has all that power as established in Journey into Mystery 104. It also establishes that he can create a circle of pure flaming energy that is powerful enough to destroy an entire galaxy. That's just him, as himself. No absorbing other power or wielding anything. But he can wield, if you were wondering, specifically the Twilight Sword, or the Sword of Doom. It was made using a galaxy that blew up and is now constantly on fire. It's called the Burning Galaxy, because what else would you call it? In a bit of tragedy, or irony, or however you want to view it, the sword ended up being Surtur's demise in the end. So with all his power, Surtur can be killed, just only by an object of immense power greater than 1,000 suns, or when he's not tied to one. The Twilight Sword was almost kind of like a Horcrux for Surtur. The first time he was beat, Thor had to destroy the sword before they could destroy the demon, and then the second time he was beat was using the sword. The sword was no longer tied to him, so it meant that his head could take a permanent vacation from his body. But just because the demon has been beat doesn't mean it was easy. He is less a physical energy and more just unstoppable force. Dormammu against Thanos is an interesting case. There is no denying that Dormammu is intensely powerful. His power comes from where he rules and lives, the Dark Dimension. When he's in there, it has been established that there is no fight that he can't win. He also has all the demons of the realm at his disposal, making a pretty terrifying army. But since he draws his power from his dimension, when he leaves it, he gets weaker. So in the event that Thanos were to fight him or face off somewhere that wasn't the Dark Dimension, Thanos does have a slightly better chance at winning, but probably only if he has the Infinity Gauntlet. Thanos on his own, super powerful, stronger than the Hulk, can take a hit from Thor's hammer, and can handle wearing the Infinity Gauntlet. But despite all that, he can be killed. Dormammu can't. It's never been done. If you kill him, you kill his dimension, which is near impossible to do. Thanos, without his special mitten, wouldn't stand a chance. Ego the Living Planet has caused many a problem for many a Marvel hero and villain. The way to destroy Ego is to destroy his core, and that is hard to do. It did happen, but then he just reformed himself later, so does that really count as death, or was it just rest and rejuvenate period? To survive, this man planet started absorbing other planets, that is so heavy metal. He battled Galactus twice. The first time he won with the assistance of Thor, but that doesn't mean he wasn't doing fine on his own. The second time Galactus showed up, Ego had gone insane, and Galactus didn't even want to touch that. Literally noped out of there, got help. Galactus goes to Thor, describes Ego as a menace that even he stands powerless against. The first time Ego was destroyed, the gravitational pull of the sun got hold of him. He tried to run, but crumbled instead. I looked it up. Earth's gravitational pull is about 9.8 meters per second squared. The sun's is 274 meters per second squared. But even though the sun was his ending, it was also his new beginning. The energy from it activated Ego's photosynthetic form of revitalization, and he got himself back together. He later fought a clone of himself, Alter Ego, and won. Good job. But it turns out Ego the living planet is only a small part of a big super ego. Super ego is a living bioverse. It's partially sentient. It's sentient enough to get specific enough with who it's trying to attack. The stranger, a cosmic scientist with a knack for experimentation, showed up and created Ego, Alter Ego, and Super Ego. Super Ego looks like an Ego universe, basically. He's got more bells and whistles, longer tentacles, more power, things like that. Super Ego is also powerful enough to go up against an army of Celestials. Like, there's at least 100 that he goes up against. The Celestials are gods to the Eternals, the Celestials created the Eternals, and Thanos is an Eternal, just in case anyone forgot. Super Ego is presumably defeated, but it took a long time. Thanos has mentioned fearing Galactus before. In Thanos Annual 1, future Thanos shows past Thanos that they scrap with Galactus, and past Thanos says, "Am I out of my mind taking on that cosmic powerhouse?" Later in the same issue, future Thanos shows what he considers to be like the top of the power pyramid. Galactus is in the bottom row, but that's out of every being Thanos has ever encountered and fought. He's on the same plane as Odin, Zeus, Stranger, Kronos, and a Celestial. That's a good lineup. Galactus is literally known as the Devourer of Worlds. He is a cosmic being, so he has the power cosmic. It's just unlimited cosmic energy, that's what it is. Battles between Galactus and other equal powers have literally shifted reality. He is considered by Nova Corps to be a universal threat, much like Thanos. I agree. His main weakness is his power has to be nourished. The nourishment in question: planets, whole planets. If he doesn't eat planets, he will starve and die. But if he eats extra planets, he gets extra power. He has gone up against the Mad Celestials and beat one, but there were 4, so he was outnumbered. Galactus is destined to be around forever and can move faster than the speed of light, despite the fact that he's like 18 tons and just under 29 feet tall. He has the power to throw devastating energy blasts, teleport, resurrect the dead, manipulate souls, mess with time, so the stones are probably not needed for him, except for one thing. See, Galactus, while he is a villain, he eats planets, he doesn't want to do that, he has to. So he did go out for the Infinity Gems in Thanos 4, but was going to use them to alter his own being to not be a planet eater anymore. It didn't work, but it's a thought that counts. So the Celestials, as established previously, they made the Eternals. The Celestials go from planet to planet visiting the people there. They basically are trying to find a species worthy of having Eternals. That's their main mission. If a species is deemed unworthy or fails their Eternals, then goodbye, no one survives, which is why the Celestials are sometimes considered villains. The Celestials look as menacing as they are. There are so many of them. There are about 35 that we know of, but in the fight with Super Ego, there's an army there, like at least 100. The Celestials range in size. For reference, Thanos is about 6 feet 7 inches. One of the tallest known Celestials is about 20,000 feet tall. That's like putting a water bottle next to the CN Tower. Most are just a short 2,000 feet though. Celestials are never seen without their armor. The only time we've ever seen a Celestial without their helmet was in Eternals Volume 4, Issue 9. He takes off his helmet and his head is just a flaming ball of energy. The power of the Celestials is unlimited. The Asgardian gods can't fight against them, so Odin created this super armor infused with powers from everyone on Asgard except Thor. But when he sent a blast from it, a flick of a celestial hand, and it was gone. Time and space mean nothing. They're immortal. Even if they are killed, it's not clear if they're gone or just go somewhere else. They don't need the Infinity Stones. Maybe power if they had to pick, but most of the other stuff they can just do. In the rare event that every Celestial dies, even just one staying alive can revive the entire race. There aren't many things that can kill a Celestial, but the Beyonders can. They reside in the Beyond. It's outside the multiverse. I can't comprehend that, so I'm just gonna accept it. They were the creations of the Celestials. A Beyonder kid created Secret Wars, that weird gladiator match from the 80s. A child did that. An adult is so much worse. The Beyonders launched a coordinated attack where they all attacked the Celestials at the same time and killed all but one. The reason the Beyonders were acting up was because they wanted to destroy the multiverse to get rid of someone else and then hoped when it restarted that guy would be gone. So if you tried to stop them blowing up the multiverse, they had no choice but to go after you. They also took out other entities like Lord Chaos, Master Order, Eternity, the In-Betweener, Infinity, and the Living Tribunal. That's a lot of powerful people. They have the power to build entire universes at their fingertips. Their only limit is they are confined to their own timeline. No time travel. Very sad. They can shift reality abilities, just not like time travel in traditional sense, I guess. Like a lot of people on this list, they don't really need the Infinity Stones, but if they did want one, my guess is they would choose time. Logos is loco. They started out as 3 things: Master Order, Lord Chaos, and the In-Betweener. After the Beyonders destroyed the 7th form of the universe, the 8th form was created, and in this one, Galactus evolved into a force of creation. Master Order and Lord Chaos, they liked it better when he was a force of destruction, so they tried to get him to go back. But the Living Tribunal said, no, Galactus is perfect the way he is. Order and Chaos didn't like that, so they eliminated the Tribunal so they could be the top of multiversal law. They combined together right after that so they could really be top of the food chain. And now they are Loco Logos. Their name is actually just Logos, I just think they're really unhinged. They can also kill Celestials, and they did. It's just assumed that Logos has unlimited power. Master Order and Lord Chaos were regarded by a gauntlet-wielding Thanos to be more powerful than Galactus, someone Thanos already thought was immensely powerful. Thankfully, Logos was split back into his 3 pieces. He was too powerful otherwise. I just briefly mentioned the Living Tribunal, and he's the representative for someone called the One Above All. That's also a Celestial's name, but this ain't about him. The One Above All here we're talking about is literally the top of it all. He's all things lovely and good. His twin though? Demon. His name is One Below All. So above represents love and creation, below represents hate and destruction. Below was created when above got really, really mad. It's like he literally split in half. The One Below All has one thought: destroy. Seriously, that is his only purpose. He wants to destroy everything. His power is limitless. He can and will destroy the entire multiverse on his own. His weakness is that he literally has no thoughts, head empty. So if he ever needs to make a concrete plan, he does need to get a host with a brain. Most of the time, he doesn't need a host. The One Above All literally keeps Below locked up somewhere away from the multiverse. Again, my brain can't comprehend that, so I'll just accept it, and only releases Below when it's time to reset everything. So he comes out, destroys everything, then gets locked away again until it's time to do it again. What's pretty cool about the Below is that he is the source of the mutagenic 3rd gamma energy form, the form that creates Hulks.
White Rabbit is Lorena Dodson, and while she might kinda seem like a joke villain, we've seen some pretty dark storylines featuring her in the past few years. White Rabbit is often out to prove that she's one of the baddest bads around and earn acclaim and recognition for her misdeeds. In the Absolute Carnage one-shot, Symbiote Spider-Man, we get to see White Rabbit featured in a much darker tale, when she runs into a judge who at one point came into contact with the Venom symbiote. In the flashback, we find out she ends up getting on his bad side, and in order to get back at him for what she believes was an unfair trial, she comes after him and his son, confronting them with a gun. It turns out the weapon is a joke gun, which actually shoots out just a little flag that says bang, but the shock of the whole event actually triggers a heart attack in the judge's son, Dan, who dies as a result. White Rabbit is arrested, but escapes out of her trial, being busted out by a large mech-like rabbit, very White Rabbit style. She torments the judge as she leaves, who attempts to break into the courtroom to kill her, but accidentally shoots an innocent court stenographer instead. Lorena might have shown remorse here, but instead she actually felt absolved of guilt by the judge's act, showing just how twisted and cold she can be, something that we don't always see a side of her, and I honestly feel like she can be pretty scary at times because of that. These are the kinds of stories I would love to see more of with White Rabbit. What do you think of White Rabbit? Would you like to see more just like intense stories with villains? I feel like we just sometimes don't get enough of those. I mean, sometimes we get too many. Once again, Joker, I'm looking at you. Amazo is no ordinary android. He possesses technology that allows him to replicate the abilities and powers of the superheroes that he battles. This gives him a significant advantage in combat, making him an opponent to be reckoned with, and that's not all. Amazo can even duplicate his opponent's weapons, making him an even more challenging adversary. This is a villain who can take on not just the powers of the Justice League, but who can also grapple, lasso, and fly majestically with a cape, I imagine, if he so chooses, with the best of them. The Flash, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern make up the roster that Amazo initially faced, and as such, these are usually the power sets that he possesses by default. But in general, Amazo is pretty amazing. Yeah, they don't do a lot with him, I feel like. This next one is honestly just so ridiculous. We're talking about Swarm, a ridiculous villain, but that doesn't mean that I of course don't want more of him in the comics. After all, he is ridiculous, and if you know me, if you've watched any videos that I have hosted, you know that I love Ridiculous. Who is Swarm? He's a German World War II scientist who is made up of bees. Killer bees. He escaped after the war and had enough loot in his possession to basically fund his research on killer bees. What he likes to do, mad science stuff. That research led him to becoming devoured by a swarm of initially passive bees who were turned monstrous and then became basically uncontrollable. Trying to control them and it backfired. However, his consciousness ended up merging with the bees as he was devoured, allowing him to basically live on in the swarm, which he often manipulates into a humanoid shape. Also, I gotta say, I was so excited when I was playing Marvel Strike Force when I got Swarm in my game. We're not sponsored, but I wish we were. The Marvel Strike Force, hit us up, come on. This next villain is very obscure. We're talking about Baron Bug. Yeah, we got another bug villain for you if you like bug villains. I know I do. Baron Bug and his insect army. He first appeared in House of Mystery issue number 163 back in the 1960s. Here he was introduced as the wildest villain yet on the cover and ended up going up against hero Robbie Reed, the original owner of the H-Dial for those that didn't know. Despite the claim that he was the wildest villain, this wasn't enough to keep Baron Bug going in terms of his momentum, and he quickly fell into obscurity. He did resurface many years later in the 2000s in the 52 series and Doom Patrol, but still most people don't even know who he is, never mind the fact that he was once labeled as the wildest villain in all of DC Comics. A bold claim indeed. One of my favorite new villains from Spider-Man, this one actually comes to us from a not as well known Spider-Man title, or at least I don't think as many people know about it, Spine-Tingling Spider-Man. Now we're not talking about the physical comic series, which also is really great, but instead the digital only Infinity comic. If you aren't familiar with the Infinity comics, they are nice, light, short reads that are laid out more like kind of like a webtoon where you like scroll down vertically through them to the end. I personally love this format, it's so cool and there's just so much alternate and interesting stuff that creatives can do with storytelling in this format. The Infinity comics are also only available through Marvel Unlimited, so if you want to check them out, get Marvel Unlimited and you can check them all out. Honestly, Marvel Unlimited is also great. Once again, not sponsored, but I wish we were, we should be, Marvel. In the Infinity comic by Saladin Ahmed, the villain in this story haunts Spider-Man with nightmares, keeping him awake and exhausted. Honestly, my biggest fear, I constantly feel like I'm overworking myself and I do not get enough sleep due to having some mild insomnia, I'd say, and I have a fear of dying from exhaustion as a result. Although, I hope I'm a long way away from that and I'm not that exhausted. In the end, we learn that this villain is known simply as the Sleep Stealer. Honestly, like I said, so scary. And they also have a haunting song, which you can find on Marvel's website that accompanies them as well, being played throughout the comic. I think it's also on YouTube too. Yeah, you should listen to it. It's creepy. Woo. From super creepy to super goofy, Calendar Man to most people is just a guy who is obsessed with the date. What a ridiculous villain. But in reality, he's also one of the most accomplished villains. During his first appearance, he almost managed to defeat Batman, one of the greatest and smartest detectives in the entire world, by giving him an almost unsolvable problem. That's right, he almost stumped Batman. Calendar Man sent an anonymous letter promising to commit 5 crimes, one each day, each one corresponding to a particular season in theme, with the 5th day also being a clue as to the true identity of Calendar Man with the 5th season. What is the 5th season? Batman failed to capture Calendar Man on the first 4 days, often arriving late to the scene of the crime. On the 5th day, it was only an ad for Calendar Man's side hustle as a magician, as he was playing for a suspicious amount of time coinciding with the crimes, 5 days at the Bijou Theater in Gotham, that allowed Batman to connect the dots. Where would Batman be without ads from the local newspaper? Where would any of us be without the local newspaper? Even Batman knows that local news is important. Also, I didn't say what the 5th season was, but you can guess what it is in the comments, and we'll also see how many of you are probably familiar with that story, because I know I could figure it out. When I got to that reveal, I was like, really? Oh, okay. Mr. Smile and Mr. Sulk both have too cool a design to not do more things in the comics. They make their first appearance back in Doctor Strange issue number 5 back in 2020, and only recently made another new appearance in Vengeance of the Moon Knight earlier this year in 2024, reminding me of how much I love them and think they deserve just more appearances. Hopefully, we won't have to to wait another few years before we get another appearance of these two. You might think you know Polka Dot Man, but do you really know him? If you've seen James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, you are familiar with a version of Abner Krill, but the original Polka Dot Man, also Abner Krill, of the New Earth continuity, was a bit different when it came to his power set. Initially, when Polka Dot Man, or Mr. Polka Dot, first appeared, he came armed with multiple different weapons, which actually all came from the polka dots on his suit. He could basically pull them off his suit and then turn them into any means of different weapons and devices. Super cool. Even once turning one into a getaway vehicle. Yeah, an entire vehicle from one polka dot. This is the version of Polka Dot Man I'd be interested in seeing getting more love, especially if we got like a live action version of this version of Polka Dot Man, although I did enjoy the version that they included in the Suicide Squad, so you know, that was good too, but the polka dots were a little different. What's better than leaping somewhat high? Walking on stilts. That's the premise behind this strange Marvel supervillain. Wilbur Day is a scientist who began his life of crime after stealing a coworker's design and using it to build a pair of armored stilt legs. Granted, his entire body is covered in metallic armor as well, and it is pretty strong. He even smashed She-Hulk down through the street and into a subway tunnel one time during a fight. Pretty impressive. But tragically, being taller than other heroes does not mean you're automatically better than them in a fight. There's of course that whole knock the legs out from under them strategy, and of course his armor also like apparently has weak spots which have been exposed in the comics before to just easily take him down. They're like, oh, a weak point, poke. He's done. Iron Man at one point even fought armor with armor by throwing one of Stiltman's legs right back in his face after he detached them to jettison away and knock Stiltman out as a result. Poor Stiltman, he just can't catch a break. And finally, our last but certainly not our least villain, definitely our most villain, Silver Swan, has such a cool design that when I first saw her in modern day comics, I thought she was actually a new character. But it turns out no. She is a classic Wonder Woman villain. The fact that I didn't know this made me think that she just hasn't gotten enough love throughout her history. So I'm here to help remedy that fact by including her on this list and telling you about her in case you didn't know either. There have been a few different versions of Silver Swan over the years, but she is at her core originally an 80s character, making her first appearance in Wonder Woman issue number 288 back in 1981. In the modern day, she is Vanessa Capitelis, and her powers allow her to manipulate tiny nanite robots in her bloodstream. Move over, Bloodshot! Initially, the character was known for her flight abilities and sonic scream, and for those that love the classic version, do not worry, she still has both those powers in the modern day as well.
The West Coast Avengers get all the weird villains. Cactus is a great example. He is a cactus and he's funny. Literally the first time he's seen in West Coast Avengers 17, Wonder Man laughs at him because he's a cactus. Cactus was created by the Dominius computer from a desert cactus. The computer gave the cactus human-like mobility and intelligence. This cactus is the original, but there are hundreds of duplicates out there apparently. Cactus's powers are shooting his cactus needles at a destructive speed and regenerating quickly, as he is technically a super powered plant. There were two other villains created from desert elements alongside Cactus. They were Butt, made of rock, and Gilla, made from the venomous lizard called the Gilla Monster. A super cactus, while funny and cool, didn't stand much of a chance against the West Coast Avengers and was defeated, but maybe we'll see a clone of him somewhere soon. Live action Two Gun Kid or Rawhide Kid can fight it. The leader of the group of desert misfits Cactus was Sunstroke. He was a human, however we don't really know how he got his powers. The villain just says he created himself, whatever that means. All he says to explain is that a man's sense of strategy was melded with the power of the Daystar. Merging with this power made him capable of absorbing light and heat. He can also generate light and heat to attack with. He did threaten to melt the armor off Iron Man's back. He fought the Avengers in the desert that day and disappeared shortly after that battle was ultimately lost. He resurfaced to attend a weapons expo and briefly fought Captain America. He went on to fight the X-Men. Later he joined the Masters of Evil, but was arrested after the team unsuccessfully took on the Thunderbolts. Echidna is literally mother. She is the mother of monsters both in Greek mythology and Marvel mythology. She has fought the Avengers Standard a few times and was affiliated with the Defenders of the Deep. She helped King Namor keep humans out of the water when the king declared the oceans off limits to everything that wasn't native to it. Echidna was also part of the Doom Maidens. During her time there, she attempted to recruit the Amazons Amazons, but ended up fighting the Amazons and losing. Most of her scraps with the Avengers happened while she was on the Defenders of the Deep. Eventually, she fought Ghost Rider and was neutralized by him. Icon among men, literally, his name is Icon. Icon appeared in 2 issues, Excalibur 59 and 60. He was a Wakandan biochemist who experimented on himself with the advanced tech Wakanda had to offer. The experiments resulted in him gaining the ability to turn himself and others into wood. With his new power, he set his eyes on the Wakandan throne. He had the idea in his head that Black Panther did not respect him as a scientist. Not true, by the way. One night during a Wakandan celebration, Icon shows up and starts turning people to wood. Luckily, the Avengers are in attendance, something Icon did not plan for. He does have an ace up his sleeve though. When someone is turned to wood, they are then under Icon's control. Black Panther wouldn't let the Avengers attack the wooden army as they are still technically his subjects. But worry not, out of literally nowhere comes this guy called Jungle Man to distract Icon. Jungle Man gives the Avengers their moment to start the fight, but Icon surrenders very quickly. The reason is because his whole plan rested on taking the throne quickly through fear, because the turning to wood thing only lasts an hour. The change back makes him pass out and he's carried away by Black Panther. Grotesque is hard to kill, for real. He first fought against the X-Men and was the guy that everyone thought eliminated Professor X, but he didn't because it was Changeling, but the energy blast Grotesque took then didn't kill him, and he went on to become a menace to Miss Marvel next. She also hit him with something that should have ended him. He again survived and fought the Avengers. In this particular battle, he was part of a group of subterranean beings that were initially fleeing their home underground because it was being attacked by deviants. Grotesque was a villain at heart though, and later, after that battle, kidnapped Thor's human host, Donald Blake, holding him hostage while Grotesque's lava men brought the living rock to the surface. The idea was that the living rock would then blow up a lot of the surface world. Thor made sure that didn't happen and broke the rock before it could come up. All the energy from the rock supposedly destroyed Grotesque. But he lived. He really is that one Emma Roberts surprise but you thought you'd seen the last of me meme. Turns out the energy just destroyed his body, not his spirit, so that was still floating around. The lava men took that spirit and put it in impenetrable armor, and he went on to fight the X-Men again. Nightcrawler found the cheat code to defeat Spirit Armor Grotesque. He took off his helmet. That's it. That caused the spirit to dissipate. Is this the end for Grotesque? Who knows? He has come back so many times, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him again soon. Making a deal with the devil is a common occurrence in the Marvel Universe. Actor Jason Rowland joined the trend in Tower of Shadows 5 when he made a deal with a demon, acting success in exchange for his soul. The demon was revealed to be Satanish, created by Dormammu and one of the most powerful demons seen by Earth. Jason's side effect of the deal was he looked like a monster, so he stayed out of the spotlight for a few years. He also, in that time, took on the villain name Hangman. Eventually, he met the mercenary group Night Shift and took over the team for Satanish. Hangman convinced the team to give up their souls to him so he could have more fame and power. The only thing was in the middle of all of this, his group caught the attention of the West Coast Avengers. The West Coast Avengers and Night Shift, while initially at odds, joined forces once the Night Shift realized their souls were in jeopardy. When the two teams defeated Hangman and his master, Hangman left to join another team of villains, the Lethal Legion. The Legion belonged to Satanish, and they again fought the West Coast Avengers and lost. The name Hangman didn't come out of nowhere. He carries around an enchanted rope. The rope can be as long as he wants it to be, and you can't cut it unless he wants you to. Literally, by force of will, Hangman can make the rope uncuttable. The rope is like an extension of Hangman as it responds telepathically to him. But if you hurt the rope, you won't hurt him. Necrodamus was born all shriveled up. His body was incredibly weak. The natural fix here is to turn to dark magic. That's the only thing you can do. Necro discovered that he can gain strength and even a godlike form if he steals the lives of innocent people. Classic move. The first time he tried it, he was defeated by the Defenders. The second time he tried it, he was stopped by the Avengers, specifically Scarlet Witch. She sent his soul straight to Limbo. Eventually, he did make it out of Limbo and fought the Fantastic Four, and then was sent back to limbo. Eventually, the shriveled man was taken care of by Agatha Harkness when she created zombies to attack him. He did have quite the run though. Agatha, Fantastic Four, Defenders, and of course the Avengers. Even though Necro's physical body was weak, he still had some magical powers like flight, teleportation, energy bolts, and shields. There are actually 3 Marvel characters that have taken on the name Chlorine, and none of them are popular. Marvel keeps trying and it has yet to work. I think they are all villains too. For sure the Chlorine I'm talking about right now is a villain. The actual name of this maybe person was never revealed, but his body is made of chlorine, so he is Chlorine. I don't think this villain is human. He refers to humans as humans, and usually if you are a human you wouldn't make a point to do that. This particular version of the character has only been seen once in Avengers Volume 1 issue 188. In that single issue we meet the whole team of elements actually. There's 4 of them: chlorine, carbon, phosphorus, vanadium, and radium. They are referred to as the Elementals, but they are not affiliated with the ones in Spider-Man Far From Home at all. The Elementals catch the attention of the Avengers because they are messing with a nuclear reactor. They might have been humans that forgot they were humans. It's complicated. What we do know is that they take humans to this pod connected to the nuclear reactor to rearrange their atoms to make them the desired element. So maybe that's where they all came from. They are trying to create 100 more element people. That is their goal. My guess is they want the whole periodic table. They fail, and the Avengers eventually defeat them. Chlorine did make the team retreat at first though. Since his entire body is chlorine, he can release large quantities of chlorine gas, and that's very poisonous. He doesn't seem to have any other powers past that though. The Avengers defeat the Elementals by blowing up the reactor. The mixture of nuclear plasma and their charged atoms breaks down their atomic structures, which is their bodies. So it's presumed that they all, including Chlorine, are done for. But according to the conservation of mass, nothing can be created or destroyed though. It's possible that if the character were to pick up steam, someone could just do some weird experiment and put all the atoms back together and we'd have chlorine again. This guy was primarily a villain to Thor, but did scrap with the Avengers too. Jared Carstairs was a skilled inventor and weatherman. Jared was not a good person. He stalked a girl to the point of getting fired from being the local weatherman. He couldn't handle not having the weather in his life, so he became Weather Maker. He created a suit that could create weather, not just sunny days, but also rain and tornadoes and lightning and hail. He, a force to be reckoned with. He ended up kidnapping the person he stalked, and that's when the Avengers stepped in. Weather Maker did a decent job of holding off the Avengers until Thor came back and destroyed the suit's power pack. Without it, the Weather Maker was just a guy. He was arrested, but the clever guy hid some weather circuitry in a hollow tooth and used that to escape jail. His escape effort channeled the Godstorm, which had been imprisoned by Thor, and the Godstorm hoped that this weather-crazed man would be his vessel of vengeance against Thor. So the Weather Maker got actual powers from this Godstorm and became Torrent. He ransacked New York City until Thor returned to take him back to Asgard. The guy used so much power, he pretty much exhausted himself. This made it easy for Thor to bring Torrent to Odin and get depowered and sent back to Earth. All of this happened in the Thor Godstorm series from 2001. You know how some people believe that every celebrity is secretly a member of some like demonic group or something? Well, Marvel actually did explore that once. This villain's name is Defiler, and he fought the West Coast Avengers. The Defiler is a demon. His particular brand of demon does not reside in our dimension, but does need the life force of others to survive and maintain his powers and his dimension. So he decided to come and kidnap people on Earth. But he did it with style. He arrived to Earth as a rock star. His band was called Corruption of Innocence. Iconic all around, no notes here. It's such a clever idea because people love celebrities, they will follow them anywhere, so it really wasn't hard for the guy to get people to literally follow him anywhere. And when he finished them off, there were hundreds of other people willing to take their place. The Defiler took everything up a notch at one of their concerts and started kidnapping the entire crowd. That's not even the wildest part of this issue. The whole thing is bonkers. To save all the people that have been transported through the portal to the demon dimension, Hank Pym and Mockingbird go to the dimension with a big rope tied around Pym. There are at least 100 people to save though, and all their life forces have been depleted, so they're all too weak to walk out. The solution? Hank Pym takes a fingerboard, those little tiny skateboards, and turns it into a huge skateboard so everyone can ride it out. The Defiler ultimately does get defeated when he is thrown back into his world. It's presumed that he is gone forever and died alongside his world. The world has nothing on it to feed anymore, so it is presumably gone. If you want to check out all the wacky antics, the comic is West Coast Avengers Volume 2, Issue 38.
The story of Martin Lee, Mr. Negative, is actually quite interesting. The man who would become Mr. Negative was a member of the Snakeheads in China. He smuggled immigrants into the United States as a crew member of the Golden Mountain ship, but when the ship crashed onto the New York City shores, he stole the identity of one of the deceased immigrants named Martin Lee, but was unfortunately captured by the Maggia crime family and delivered to the chemist Simon Marshall, who was developing a new synthetic substance called D-Light, and was testing it on runaway teens and illegal immigrants. Thanks to D-Light and his unique biology, Martin Lee survived and developed superpowers related to the Dark Force and the Light Force, and he became Mr. Negative, dedicating himself to becoming Chinatown's kingpin of crime. He can take control of other minds and empower others and objects with Dark Force energy. He has the strength to send Spider-Man flying through 2 whole buildings. He can tank blows from Spider-Man and Anti-Venom, and is fast enough to dodge bullets. Whisper Adair is a villain that I actually had never heard of before. She's been around since 2000, and as a street-level villain, mainly to Batman, but to other heroes as well from time to time, she's actually quite unique. Originally having ties to the League of Shadows, Whisper was given a serum by Ra's al Ghul that not only made her immortal, but gave her the terrifying ability to turn into a literal snake lady that can spit acid. If that weren't enough though, she even gained minor mind control abilities, and the serum even gave her the power to create a small group of men who also have the ability to shapeshift into different animals. While she is tied to both the League of Shadows and Intergang, her loyalty is mainly to herself, and she has become infamous in the Gotham underworld. Steel Serpent is basically the nemesis of Iron Fist, and he is quite the capable chappie. Davos is the son of the Thunderer, aka Lai Kung, and growing up, there was a lot of pressure on him to become the next Iron Fist. Davos took his shot at trying to defeat the dragon Shao Lao in order to gain the power of the Iron Fist, but he ultimately lost and was defeated. The fight itself was not sanctioned, and for that, he was banished from Kunlun and swore to wrest the power of the Iron Fist from whoever would succeed in the task. That was Danny Rand. As the Steel Serpent, he actually managed to fulfill that goal when he beat Danny in combat and took the power of the Iron Fist for himself, that is, until his own defeat. Davos's powers were then restored by the Crane Mother in exchange for becoming the champion of the mystical land of Kun-Zi. Every time I have to talk about the Batman villain known as Cornelius Stirk, I get a whole lot of heebie-jeebies. Stirk suffers from delusions which make him believe that he requires the nutrients of a human heart in order to stay alive. But not just any heart. Specifically, Cornelius believes that the heart is the most nutritious when it is full of norepinephrine, a natural hormone that secretes when a person is terrified, as well as adrenaline. So he uses his unexplained psionic abilities to mentally make people perceive him as someone else, which, other than allowing him to break out of Arkham Asylum the first time, also allows him to get close to his victims and then completely terrify them in the most insane ways possible before he quickly ends their lives and partakes in a nice old hearty meal. Cornelius is incredibly effective, and he's been able to both evade Batman and even make the Dark Knight go unconscious. Carlos Lamorto, a crime lord in South America and parts of Europe, first ever appeared as the villain Black Tarantula in Amazing Spider-Man number 419, and not too long after that, he gave Spider-Man one of the most absolutely brutal beatdowns I have ever seen the wall crawler suffer. The title of Black Tarantula is a legacy title that is handed down generation to generation, with the heir to the title being taken from an early age to begin a life of intense training. Now, I personally couldn't find how Carlos gained superhuman abilities, but he certainly has them, and used them when he beat up Spider-Man. The Black Tarantula has superhuman agility and strength, able to optimally press over 30 tons. He can exert himself at peak for 24 hours, he's nearly bulletproof, his speed is faster than Spider-Man's, he has absurdly powerful eyesight, he has the ability to heal both himself and others from near fatal injuries, and if that all weren't enough, he even has optic blasts. He has acted in some heroic capacities from time to time, which the heroes need to thank their lucky stars for, because he can steamroll a heck of a lot of people. DC's Deathstroke is one of a few villains on this list that really toes the line of being a mere street level villain. With physical abilities 10 times that of a normal human being, and the ability to use 90% of his brain, Deathstroke is a guy that has proven himself more than enough times. He has fought multiple different members of the Justice League, and even when his natural abilities have not been enough, he has found numerous ways to power himself up enough to get the job done, even being able to fight on par with Superman. He has taken down the Atom, Impulse, Batman, Kid Flash, the Phantom Lady, Uncle Sam, and obviously the Teen Titans. During Identity Crisis, he nearly took down the entire Justice League, taking down each member with methods tailored to each of their strengths and weaknesses before they rallied. But even with all of that, being a mercenary first and foremost, Deathstroke started as and often finds himself working on a street level capacity more often than anything else. Okay, so if you know who the mutant known as Legion is, the one who has hundreds of different alternate personalities that all have different mutant powers, well, Mary Walker is sort of like that. Only for Mary, she has only a handful of alternate personalities, and they just allow her to access the powers that as just Mary, she can't access. Those powers include limited amounts of pyrokinesis, telekinesis to move small objects, grabbing her dropped weapons, or even turning objects into armor, and telepathy, usually used to manipulate others, cause distractions, or influence people to do things without thinking, like grabbing their weapons. Her Mary persona is actually a pretty timid and quiet person, but her other main persona is Typhoid, who is more adventurous, lustful, and violent. She later adopted a few other personas like Bloody Mary, who was sadistic and brutal, and pretty much hated all men, and Zero, who was a cold, calculated, and militaristic person. Of all the characters on this list, I think Poison Ivy is by far not only the most powerful, but also the one who has the least amount of business being just a street level villain. Dr. Pamela Isley was a brilliant botanist who knew everything there is to know about plant life. She managed to work her way up to a position researching plants at Wayne Enterprises, but was fired after suggesting using plant-based chemicals to develop brainwashing substances. As she was being escorted out by security, she spilled chemicals all over herself from her newest assignment and gained a connection to the Green, an elemental force that connects all plant life. As a Batman villain, Ivy's goals aren't as simple as robbing banks and running gangs. She fights for the environment, using her connection over all plant life to really cause big problems, as her control over plant life can reach a global scale, and she's even put the Man of Steel under her control using her powerful toxins. Poison Ivy is basically a god in Batman street level villain clothing. Brock Rumlow was a gang member and criminal in New York City from a young age. As an adult, he honed his criminal talents under the tutelage of Taskmaster and became a mercenary and assassin, eventually gaining the attention and approval of the Red Skull. Rumlow's physical abilities have been enhanced to the peak of human ability, rivaling Captain America himself. He is highly skilled in combat, and he at one point also gained the ability to fire energy blasts capable of vaporizing multiple dudes from his head thanks to the Terrigen Mists, but this was only temporary. A lot of his feats have been against Captain America, who he physically matches, but he has physically manhandled quite a lot of people and has taken the lives of many others with his bare hands. He has tanked some incredibly heavy hits and is often underappreciated for just how much damage he can both take out and dish out. Basically, if Captain America can do it, there's a good chance that Crossbones can do it too, which makes him pretty darn capable. And lastly, maybe more powerful than you think is a bit of a lie for this point, because when it comes to the Batman villain Bane, he is widely known to be wildly powerful, especially as he is the one infamous for breaking the bat. Other than breaking the bat, Bane is largely known for his incredible levels of strength, which is even impressive before he uses his venom, being much stronger than Batman himself. After being pumped full of venom though, he gains a low superhuman level of strength, becoming capable of lifting up to 3 tons, as well as becoming superhumanly durable, fast, and even gaining a level of superhuman healing. But his strength is only one half of the equation, because what some people forget is that Bane also has a genius level intellect without ever actually going to school. He is a polymath, expert tactician, escapologist, multilingual, and even has a photographic memory. You couple all of that with his martial skill, and it's easy to see why Bane has become one of the Dark Knight's most feared adversaries.
Ben Reilly's Spider-Man once fought a demonic train, a possessed Train. I love comic book writers because how did this idea even happen? I'm obsessed. The train does have a title. It is the 666 train, of course, all aboard the 666 train. Doctor Strange's death and death of Doctor Strange Spider-Man causes a lot of problems as it resulted in the magic used to keep certain magical threats captive loosening their hold, so all of these bad magical things started escaping. Not good. If you were wondering why Peter Parker wasn't handling this, it's because he was in a coma. Felicia, or Black Cat, was helping out because she didn't trust Ben that much to be a good Spider-Man, so lucky her. She also got to fight the demonic Polar Express. I think it's actually the New York City subway. The train is possessed, but it is also maybe like a portal to the underworld because there are dozens of demons coming out of it. The task was specifically to exorcise the 666 train. Ben and Black Cat succeeded by defeating all the demons coming out of it. I really hope this idea originated from someone missing their morning train one too many times. Okay, so this next villain antagonized a hero that I also can't believe exists and antagonized the villain right back. The Heckler was the hero. His powers are literally just be annoying. That's me. I don't know. I'm secretly the Heckler. The hero wasn't super popular, which means his villain's popularity is basically non-existent. They're also a little bit silly. Boss Glitter was the main antagonist of the first Heckler issue. Don't let the ridiculous name fool you. He is not a DIY king. He is a mob boss. A very dangerous mob boss with a little flair. I can't stress this enough. This villain looks ridiculous, but he is ruthless. He looks like a clown trying to impersonate Prince, but he controls the entire city with an iron fist. He uses old Mardi Gras masks to hide his face. The villain has a bunch of lieutenants that manage different parts of the city for him, and the Heckler keeps defeating them and throwing them in jail. So naturally, Boss Glitter wants the Heckler to heckle no more. When his lieutenants fail to end his comedy act, Glitter sends a bouquet of flowers with a bomb in them. The Heckler does still survive though, and we don't hear from Boss Glitter anymore. Not because something happened to him, but because something happened to the Heckler comics. They had bad sales, so it was cancelled after 6 issues. Boss Glitter does now live in my head rent-free though. His real name is Alessandro Hummer. I don't know why he chose Boss Glitter, never explained, maybe because glitter gets everywhere, I guess we'll never know. I do not personally know which Marvel writer sat down and decided to create a villain whose only power was juggling, but oh wow do I thank them for their service. Thank you Mark, thank you Elliot. Oddball is the character, and he is, as stated, a juggler. That's it, that's his power. This guy doesn't have any special abilities other than really good hand-eye coordination. Oddball juggles dangerous things, so he is threatening. He juggles balls similar to like smoke grenades, and there are some with corrosive liquid inside. There are spiky edge balls. It's all very creative. There are more, but basically if you think the weapon can be made or put in a ball, he can juggle it. He was part of some bad guy teams like Death Throws. That was a team specifically made of evil jugglers. I am not lying, I promise you. And he also joined the Masters of Evil. I can't believe that there's a villain that all they have going for them is juggling. Do Mark and Elliot hate the circus? I don't know. In all fairness, the method of taking something random and creating a character has been around a long time and used not only by Marvel but also DC, like Kite Man. Who hates kites that much? Turns out this one does have some history behind it. The real name for Kite Man is Charles Brown. There was a comic strip character that often gets his kite stuck in trees, and his name was Charlie Brown, so Charles may have been based off Charlie. Kite Man wasn't super popular when he first got on people's radar, but he started feeling the wind at his back when he was in Harley Quinn the animated series. The guy had a pretty big role in that series and now is getting his own show. According to the reliable source that is the internet, it looks like it's set to be released this year, so we will check back in a few months. Glad the character found his place, his niche if you will, but he is just so niche. What do you mean this grown man is just flying around with a giant kite strapped to his back? Actually, that's just the Wright brothers. Those American original aviators have quite a bit in common with Kite Man. Unique to Kite Man, of course, there are weapon kites like a trap net kite and a really, really big kite. People in the Marvel Universe have been trying to recreate the super soldier serum since it created Captain America. Not every trial goes well, and some go unbelievably poorly. Horace Littleton attempted to recreate the serum, but he wanted to add a little something. That something was, and since I'm not sure if we can say it here, take the first letters of long, slow, down. Okay, first letters of long, slow, down. Got it? I hope so. Shockingly, this version of the super serum did not pick up steam, and the guy lost his funding. This meant he was forced to test the serum on himself. He turned into Dr. Mind Bubble, a truly mind-boggling villain. He blows bubbles, evil bubbles, that trap his enemies' minds. They create a virtual reality for the person in the bubble, and it's very, very real. The person truly believes they exist there and have no idea they are in a bubble. It's also outrageous. The only way to escape the bubble is if you decided to put an end to your existence in the bubble realm, then you can wake back up in actual reality. Dr. Mind Bubble was defeated by Captain America when Cap bent the Mind Bubble tube in his head with his shield. That meant all the bubbles were forced to stay in Mind Bubble's head, and that made the guy go crazier than he already was. He then launched his own mind, body, and soul out of a window. DC creates some truly unhinged villain designs. This time, it's an unborn baby that has super intelligence that lives its life suspended in the top portion of an advanced robotic suit. Catch all that? Orphan is the baby's villain name. Technically it's Orphan 3 or Orphan the 3rd maybe. Orphan was going to be just regular baby, like born instead of permanently suspended in a villain suit, but his parents were scientists in the DC universe and that never goes well for anyone. The scientists were studying this thing called the Source Wall. The wall was breached and his parents were eliminated. Luckily for Orphan, they had a techno-familiar named Darling that saved Orphan's life, and receiving all the energy caused him to have above average intellect for an unborn baby. Thank goodness, we barely want Orphan running around as is. Imagine if he actually had the intelligence of a baby the entire time. Paste Pot Pete was so goofy, the character reinvented himself. He came to the decision with the help of Spider-Man when Spidey laughed at him. Was it a nice thing for Spider-Man to do? Maybe not, but when you decide to become a villain, sorry, but I think people don't need to be as nice to you. He turned to crime because he thought it would make him more money, which at least turned to crime for the right reason, you know? Because you want to be a menace to society. Anyway, the guy was already making a lot of money. He created, like, the Gorilla Glue of the Marvel Universe, very sticky. His glue is what he uses to create crime, and he literally carries it around in a bucket with his glue gun in hand, connected to the bucket using a tube. It's all very technical, but I don't know, there has to be a better way. You know, dude, you're rich, get a backpack. The glue is a force to be reckoned with, backpack or not. The paste dries instantly and can stick to almost anywhere. The only thing that can affect the glue is ultraviolet light. Eventually, Pete upgraded to a system that didn't involve him carrying a bucket around, but as said at the beginning of this point, the villain reinvented himself with the unwanted help of Spider-Man. Spider-Man is known for his little quips and roasts. When Spidey met Paste Pot Pete, he laughed a little too hard, and the villain had had enough and decided to become Trapster. He thought it sounded more menacing. I don't know if I necessarily agree, it kinda sounds like a board game to me, but y'all let me know what you think in the comments. Let's revisit a favorite villain of mine, Calendar Man. Every iteration of this character is fabulous, you can't deny that, I will not let you. His first, middle, and last names are all calendar adjacent. His name is Julian Gregory Day. Julian themes his crimes and his criminal outfits to different holidays. So for example, this past weekend we probably would have had an evil Easter bunny roaming the streets hiding little evil eggs. The first version of Calendar Man was probably meant to be a ridiculous sort of joke villain, but DC is in the rewriting era and gave this guy a bit more depth and also totally changed his look. I prefer the old one that was looking camp right in the eye, but I guess the man with the calendar tattooed around his head is also fine. Calendar Man does not have any superpowers, I guess, but he is very good at inventing. He always has a new gadget to perfectly match the holiday or event he is emulating. He also, before they backstoried him, he always had new outfits. This man's closet must be a department store, honestly. Probably the most outrageous version of the character, if everything previously stated wasn't enough, was a version of him from the Tom King run of Batman. That guy was a metahuman that would be reborn once a year when he shed his skin, so he was almost like a lizard. DC has had some controversial characters over the years. This villain is yet another fun little example. I was so excited when I found him because he's from Colombia and I'm from Colombia, and I was like, that's so cool. I really hope he's a well-rounded and interesting villain with no racially insensitive characteristics at all. His name is Snowflame, and he is a cartel leader that creates the white powder that shares a name with Coca-Cola. Yeah, in order to have powers, Snowflame must use the other method of ingesting the substance, the nose. Once that happens, he is super strong, speedy, can't feel pain, and if you touch him, he is coated in the snow, so you will also be affected by the substance. He also has fire powers because you'll need that when it comes to the snow. No, the character is not widely loved for obvious reasons, but there is 1% out there that is single-handedly keeping this character afloat. There is a fan-made webcomic out there that gives the character backstory and even puts him up against various DC heroes. This person just really loves Snowflame. The character has made a few reappearances and died 3 times. The first time was his first appearance against the New Guardians. He was in a shed that blew up. The second was a rebooted version of the character that met his end to a giant jaguar. And the third and current final time, instead of snorting his usual power-inducing stuff, he snorted a poison frog. Everything I just said only makes sense here. I literally can't say this anywhere else. I'll sound bonkers. Anyways, Snowflame, ew, hate him. Dr. Forklift has only been seen once, and that was enough. I am flabbergasted with this one, for real. So he was originally a regular guy, and his job was performer. He was the great Golly Gosh Show and his trained hamsters, and they were a traveling act. They were performing at a chemical plant, and one of the hamsters got stage fright and somehow was strong enough to knock over a big spotlight that fell and hit Dr. Forklift, and a bunch of chemicals got spilled in the process, and there was a forklift nearby. A big explosion happened, and when the guy woke up, his bottom half was gone and replaced with the forklift. This sounds like I'm making it up, but I swear this is real. Dr. Forklift also became a genius because he happened to also be beside scientific papers when the chemical explosion thing happened. In a single issue he was in, the doctor was swapping humans' minds with hamsters so he could have an army and only hamsters would listen to him. Plus, the doctor needs endless electricity to survive, so he keeps the hamsters running on a wheel that generates electricity. Plastic Man ends up thwarting the villain after a battle between all the humans in hamsters' bodies and all the hamsters in humans' bodies, and Plastic Man and Dr. Forklift. Dr. Forklift gets arrested, all the hamsters and humans are given their rightful brains back, so a happy ending overall. But reading this comic was a fever dream. It's Plastic Man Volume 2, Issue 11, if you want a good laugh. DC has done it again, creating a truly unhinged character design in the form of Orphan 3 or Orphan the Third. Orphan is an orphan. Orphan is also a baby that lives suspended in an advanced robotic suit and thinks like an adult. Orphan's parents were studying the Source Wall. The Source Wall is the barrier that surrounds the multiverse. One day that barrier was breached, obliterating Orphan's parents. Orphan's mom was pregnant with him at the time, and he survived because of his family's techno-familiar, Darling. Darling assimilated Orphan's mom's body and created an artificial womb. Since Orphan and Darling were so close to the wall being breached, Orphan absorbed the power from what was on the other side of the wall, energy from the Source. The Source is the source of everything. Its power is limitless, and Orphan has that running through his veins. It gives him powers like teleportation and energy blasts. Darling and Orphan are tied to each other in some ways. When Darling was destroyed, Orphan went into a sort of like catatonic state. Dead Ringer can take on the form of any dead body he touches and can cause way more problems than you might think. Louis Dexter is a mutant. His mimicking abilities are not reserved for people, he can also mimic animals. He discovered his abilities by touching his deceased cat and father, and that is so traumatic. Dexter chose to use his powers for evil. He started to remove pieces of heroes from their graves because when he touches a deceased super person, he gets their powers. Dexter is limited to one person at a time, and if he wants to revisit the body of someone, he has to touch them again, and that is hard when you take decaying into account. Seems like it could be a major inconvenience, so he decided to make his life easier. He was going to start carrying pieces of heroes in a cigar box with him. The pieces, gross. Dead Ringer's most famous battle was when he and his partner Super Patriot became Porcupine and Captain America to destroy Captain America's reputation. The two staged a fight at a charity gala and deliberately hurt the crowd. The pair were eventually arrested. Death Adder is one of the many villains Death Ringer has impersonated, so spoiler, he was deceased at one point but was revived and then died again. Death Adder was Roland Burroughs. Roland received a surgery courtesy of Roxxon Oil Company. The surgery was supposed to give him claws, a bionic tail, and gills. The part of the surgery to give him the gills went wrong, and Roland lost the ability to speak, becoming mute. Roland, now a villain, received his costume and joined the Serpent Squad. Death Adder and the Serpents became mercs for hire. He was a pretty serious foe as his tail could move up to 60 miles per hour and was adorned with a bunch of sharp poisonous prongs. So if the sheer force of getting smacked doesn't take you out, the poison sure will. His claws also had the poison in them, and Death Adder has had about 30 appearances total. Powerful sorcerer Duran once tried unleashing monsters in Mexico City, causing immense amounts of damage. Duran lives in Mexico and he hated seeing the nature there getting destroyed. He was angry with developers and the large amounts of pollution caused by the tourism industry and just the way people treat his home. He became radicalized, and that is not something you want from a powerful sorcerer. Duran kidnapped a girl and used her as a vessel for the true power of the earth, as Duran puts it. So she caused a massive explosion downtown, and it got some local Mexican heroes involved and Superman. This all happened in Superman Annual Volume 2, Issue 12. It's also the only appearance Duran has had. The big final battle happens in downtown Mexico City, and it's a disaster. There is a huge firestorm unleashed, and it takes the powers of Superman and the 3 local heroes to get everything under control. It wasn't easy. Duran learned sorcery from Firewolf, and Firewolf was able to control Superman's mind, so now Duran is capable of that and also crushing the windpipes of Superman with only his mind, among other things, like being able to call upon the primal powers of Mother Earth. The American dragon Unkahilla was based on a real legend in Sioux mythology, and she's also a complete menace. She is a demon residing in the ground, and it destroys everything around her, especially the surface and anyone on it. She has bad vibes to the point where she can pollute the soil she just passes through, making it unusable. Unkahilla is somewhere between 30 to 50 feet long. She terrorizes the local indigenous communities, kidnapping people, swallowing people whole, destroying the food supply. Literally not the kind of pest you want in your garden. She can also create monster children that are like mini hers. She needed to be exterminated, and Wolverine was around and ready to help, so he went to take her down. Only she was a tough fight. It wasn't until her heart was separated from her body that she finally went down. Sticks and Stone have very different origin stories, but they cause trouble together like they are brothers. Sticks was originally homeless, and Stone was on a team of scientists doing experimental cancer research. The team of scientists were offering compensation for anyone willing to be experimented on, so Sticks signed up. Stone had an interesting theory that he was unauthorized to test. Stone thought that someone could become immune to cancer the same way someone can become immune to snake bites. Of course, he did run the test on Sticks, and of course it ended in the worst way. Sticks became a walking cancer, decaying any organic material he comes in contact with. Awful outcome, but at least Stone's theory was right. Sticks was immune to cancer himself. Stone felt really bad about this and vowed to find a cure for Sticks. Somewhere along the way, we actually don't know how it happened, but Stone turned into a big stone monster, and with that he gained the ability to decay any inorganic matter. So Sticks and Stone together are a team you do not want to go up against, no matter who or what you are. Blood Shadow is a very cool villain that I would never want to meet, but I think they should bring back anyway. He was known for facing off against Wolverine and perishing at the claws of Wolverine. Blood Shadow was capable of telepathy. He was also intimately familiar with the human body and its deadly pressure points like the back of his hand. Blood Shadow was also a trained martial artist. He combined this trio of skills into an interesting fighting style. He would use telepathy to determine an opponent's next move, his martial arts training to counter it, and his knowledge of the human body to determine which deadly pressure points would be exposed and which ones he could hit in the moment. Unfortunately for Blood Shadow, his telepathy was a bit too powerful in a fight with Wolverine, and he accidentally unlocked Wolverine's base feral animalistic instincts. No one can survive those, not even Blood Shadow. Headhunter started out as nothing more than a con woman, but using her powers of persuasion, she became the most powerful woman on Wall Street. She is deranged, and I mean that with everything in me. Headhunter is obsessed with Namor, so obsessed she kidnaps him and puts him in her wall of heads. You know what hunters do with animal heads they take as trophies? She did that with the people that crossed her on her journey to the top of Wall Street. She also has the ability to mesmerize people and control them, so that also has helped her in her journey to the top of the financial world. The wall was eventually destroyed, and it turns out all the people were actually just catatonic, put to sleep by Headhunter's mesmerizing powers. Headhunter also has little knife fingers, and she wears a lot of suits. The powerful villainess known as Verna once tried to destroy all spider people. Y'all, I've been waiting for the chance to talk about Verna. Verna is from Earth 001. She comes from a family that has dedicated their lives to traveling across the multiverse, hunting down and exterminating all spider totems. The family goes by the Inheritors. Like a leech, they parasite powers from other people, feeding on their life forces. The Inheritors eventually locked in on the spider totems because they wanted to defeat meet the spider deity of Earth 001, so that means it has to be every other world's battle too. They went up against an army of spider people. The odds were never in their favor. Verna and her family were left on a super radioactive Earth, Earth 3145, and were trapped there forever as they are sensitive to radiation and have to stay put in a tower. Verna ultimately passed after escaping said tower while trying to get her father's soul that was trapped in a crystal. Verna's main power is the life force energy absorption thing. Once Verna touches a person, even if she doesn't drain your life force all the way and you live, she can still sense you from almost anywhere, which is super creepy. Verna is also technically immortal. She doesn't age, she doesn't get sick, but she can be exterminated. If someone were to split her in two, she's done for. So overall, a pretty sick woman in all senses of the word, but the reason I have been waiting to mention her, one of my favorite movies when I was a little girl was Barbie Fairytopia. The main villain in that movie was La Verna, and she looks exactly the same as Marvel's Verna. Look at the hair and look at the names, they are the same. I am not saying they copied Barbie, but there are clues. Deathstalker was once a wealthy man from a prestigious family, then he decided to become a criminal. He invented something called the T-Ray or Time Displacer Ray. When used, it transports its victims to an interdimensional void for a few hours. When used, the ray looked really scary because it would make people dissolve before your eyes. It wasn't until hours later that you would find out the person was actually fine. In a fight with Daredevil, his gun exploded and it sent him to the limbo-like realm permanently. He eventually figured out how to get back to Earth, but the catch was he could only be here for up to like 5 hours before he was pulled back to limbo. During the 5 hours, he appeared like he was a phantom, and he really used that to his advantage, stealing tech and creating cybernetic death grip devices to put in his gloves. Including his Dead Ringer appearance, Deathstalker has appeared about 24 times.
Dr. Doom is always a villain that many people already put on a pedestal, so of course, it makes sense that he would eventually get powers to match his status. This all went down during the 2015 Secret Wars event, when Dr. Doom was elevated to the status of not just Emperor, but God, becoming God Emperor Doom, after being the only person willing to challenge the Beyonders during the final moments of the incursion. When everything came crashing down, Doom took the power for himself and built a patchwork-like world out of all the alternate universes that had collided with one another. It was later revealed that to have absolute power and shape reality, he'd actually been using the powers of Molecule Man, who was kept hidden away. Eventually, in a battle against his rival Reed Richards, Doom lost these powers after admitting that Reed probably would have been able to do a better job at recreating the multiverse following the incursions, thereby causing Molecule Man to instead choose to bestow his power to Mr. Fantastic. Nanaue wasn't always known for being a demigod and prince. In the previous New Earth continuity, he is hinted at being the son of the king of all sharks, also known as the Shark God, although this was all kind of seen as a rumor in regards to his origin. Initially, it wasn't very concrete. He wouldn't become a god over time necessarily, but instead would have this origin more firmly established as being his true origin as time went on in the comics. In the Prime Earth continuity and the Harley Quinn animated series today, this is firmly cemented as King Shark's origins, making him a demigod. In fact, even in the newest Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game, he's also a god. Like his father, Thane also has experience with wielding an insane amount of power. Initially though, Thane strove to simply be a healer in his everyday. He was eventually hunted down by Thanos, who was searching for his secret hidden son. Thane, being an Inhuman, didn't have powers yet when Ebony Maw first found him, but as a hybrid Inhuman and Eternal child, his powers were triggered and brought to the surface after undergoing Terrigenesis. This drastically changed his appearance and gave him an insta-kill power, where everyone within a certain, rather large radius of him would be killed simply by being near him, which is a pretty traumatizing thing to happen when you're like, I want to save people. Oh my gosh, my powers kill everyone. He could also encase people in amber. In fact, if you've heard of the story where Kitty Pryde helped Star-Lord save Spartax from the Brood after the entire planet was encased in amber, the person who had done the encasing, yeah, that was Thane. Thane would not only have insane power just from these abilities, but also would for a time have, get this, the Phoenix Force. Don't worry though, Thane would later lose the Phoenix Force after becoming trapped in the God Quarry, where he remains, or at least where he remains at the time of this recording, until I guess we remember him and pull him out of the God Quarry. There is a lot that Zod has done to sell himself as a god tier character. I feel like every time we see him, he's doing something even more extra than the last time. During the Prime Earth continuity, there's a point where Amanda Waller is lucky or unlucky enough perhaps to capture Zod to use him on her Task Force X, aka the Suicide Squad. However, even after having an explosive kryptonite device placed within his brain, Zod escapes Waller. Yeah. Does his own brain surgery, basically. Tormented by the pain of his family who are currently trapped inside the Phantom Zone, he manages to remove the bomb from his head by himself using his heat vision to break free and go rescue his family. After doing so, he also seeks out a planet for them to settle on to turn into a sort of new Krypton. The indigenous people of this planet are actually willing to work for Zod as they believe him and his family to be gods. Madeline Pryor was kind of born a god when you think about it. She is a clone of Jean Grey whose life was sparked by a piece of the Phoenix Force. The Phoenix Force itself is like a cosmic god of sorts. It's not like, I don't know if we call it a god like officially, but it's godlike in power. And because a piece of that is built into Maddie, in a way, Maddie is also like a god. If you're wondering how or why I'm including her here when she, as I've said, has always been a god, since this is the exact reason I'm not including villains like Loki on this list, so for all of you who are wondering why Loki isn't here, that's why I didn't include him, it has to do with the fact that she wasn't always aware of her true origin. During the time she wasn't aware, Maddie simply acted like a normal human woman. However, after suffering a mental break, Maddie was transformed into a However, after suffering a mental break when she realized the truth of her origin, Maddie was transformed into a supremely powerful being, allowing her to tap into her true, unlimited potential. Poison Ivy is a character who honestly should always be at a god tier, just based on her power set honestly, but there's only really ever been one point that I can think of where she decided to take things to that kind of level. For the most part, Ivy stays pretty confined to Gotham, giving Batman and the city trouble with her eco-terror, but not really extending much beyond Gotham's reach. Now and then, I've seen her also go to some other cities, I've seen her go on a crime spree with Harley in Metropolis as well, but really she stays pretty confined to a single city with her mischief. However, in the Tom King story, Everyone Loves Ivy, trauma caused Ivy to strike out and go bigger, much bigger, taking over the whole world through vegetables. Yeah, she mind controlled people through the veggies that they ate, and she used her control over everyone to basically make the world a better place and bring about kind of world peace, but of course at the expense of free will. A big no-no in the hero books. Ivy, however, was convinced to relinquish control by Harley Quinn, who Batman and Catwoman basically recruited to help them deal with this situation, and ended up giving up her influence and her power at the end of the story as a result. Owen Reese was just a normal man before he received powers that made him a god, or at least put him on that level. He was a lab technician when one day, fixing an atomic device, he just poked a hole through the universe and into the multiverse, accidentally reaching across space and time into the universe of the Beyonders, and tapping into a massive amount of power there. This power would put him on an omnipotent and omniscient level, allowing him to rearrange the molecules of matter and even energy. He could even do that with organics, although for a long time there was a psionic barrier in place so that he wouldn't do that, because it's pretty messed up, even for a villain. Molecule Man can also warp reality on a massive galactic scale. It's really weird to think of this next villain as a god, but even he has earned that status before in the comics. I know, it's crazy. And strangely, it's actually happened more than once, sort of. The other version of the character who was imbued with god powers was from an alternate reality, admittedly, but even in the main continuity, Joker has gone god tier. In this case, it all went down when he managed to trick Superman fan and often mischievous antagonist, Mr. Mxyzptlk. Mr. Mxyz only intended to give Joker 0.01% of his power, but instead, he accidentally gave him 99.99%. Yeah, yikes. Needless to say, Joker most definitely did not use this power to do anything good. Eating China as though it were takeout, yeah, super weird and super scary, and tormenting Batman daily and killing him only to res him the next day so that he could do that all over again. It should surprise no one that of course there was a time when Thanos became an almost literal god. When and where was this? In an alternate future that ended up being erased, but where CGR, aka Cosmic Ghost Rider, still hails from. even though it doesn't exist. This was a future where Thanos had committed to winning over Death's Heart by destroying not just half of all life in the galaxy, but all life in the galaxy. He had eradicated life down to the point that only a few people remained, and eventually only he did. This King Thanos, who was a ruler of the universe, brought in his past self to eliminate him. However, this reality was erased when the younger Thanos refused to do his older self's bidding, and despite all his power, still saw King Thanos as being weak. Rude. Cersei went from being a very powerful witch to being a literal goddess. How did this happen? Well, in Justice League Dark, we learned of the Witch-Marked, powerful women who had pieces of Hecate's power hidden away within themselves. Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman, is revealed to be one of these individuals as we discover, who they all are, or so we think, as it's later revealed that Cersei was also secretly one of Hecate's chosen Witch-Marked. She uses her attachment to Hecate to devise a plot to steal all the power from the other Witch-Marked and Hecate herself. Cersei actually succeeds in this surprisingly, and so gains a godly amount of power, putting her on the level of the goddess of magic, Hecate herself. In fact, because there is no Hecate after that, she basically is the new Hecate.